For 8 months, I'd been forbidden from even seeing a photo of my own grandson, Oliver. My daughter-in-law, Vivienne, had made sure of that, blocking my number, returning my gifts unopened, and telling everyone I was unstable. Then suddenly, last Tuesday, there she was on my porch in Lakewood Hills, all teary-eyed and desperate. The same woman who once threatened a restraining order if I came within 100 feet of their Oakridge home. Funny how quickly walls come down when a trust fund worth millions is suddenly frozen, and only I have the authority to release it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning started like any other in my quiet corner of Maine. The October air had that particular crispness that always reminded me of apple picking with Thomas, my late husband. From my kitchen window, I could see the maples along the shoreline, beginning their fiery transformation. 68 years I've watched those same trees change, but the view never grows old. I was pouring my second cup of tea when I heard the unfamiliar engine in my driveway. Not the mail carrier's usual Tuesday rumble, and certainly not Mrs. Henderson from next door with her rattling Volvo. This was the purr of something expensive, something foreign. Through the lace curtains, I spotted it. A gleaming black range, Rover, so out of place among the weathered Subarus and practical pickup trucks of Lakewood Hills. Before I could wonder who'd lost their way to the summer colonies, the driver's door swung open. Vivienne. My hand trembled, spilling tea across the countertop. 8 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days since I'd last seen her. At Harrison's funeral, my only son. She'd stood across the grave, gripping baby Oliver to her chest as if I might snatch him away. When I'd approached afterward, her words cut, deeper than the February wind. "You're not welcome in our lives anymore, Eleanor. Please respect that." Now here she was, strutting up my walkway in stiletto boots that punched little holes in my freshly thawed lawn. Her caramel hair, always perfectly styled, looked uncharacteristically disheveled. The designer sunglasses couldn't hide the puffiness around her eyes. "Eleanor," she called, her voice lacking its usual crisp confidence. "Please, I know you're home. We need to talk." My arthritic fingers gripped the counter edge. Should I pretend I wasn't home? Call someone? But who? Harrison was gone. My sister Judith lived 3 states away. And the neighbors, what would I even say? "Help! My daughter-in-law, who's kept my grandson from me, is at my door." The doorbell rang, its cheerful ding-dong absurdly mismatched to the moment. 3 more times it rang before I finally shuffled to answer, my house slippers whispering against the hardwood floors Harrison had installed 30 years ago. "What do you want, Vivienne?" I asked through the barely cracked door, chain still in place. A gust of cold air slipped through, carrying the scent of her expensive perfume. "Please, Eleanor," she whispered, voice breaking. "I wouldn't be here if it wasn't important. It's about Oliver." My heart lurched. "Is he hurt? Is he sick?" The panic must have shown on my face because something in her expression softened momentarily. No, he's fine. He's with my mother in Portland. Can I please come in? It's freezing out here." Against my better judgment, I unlatched the chain. She stepped inside, bringing the chill with her. In my living room, with its faded armchairs and crocheted throws, she looked like an exotic bird that had flown into the wrong habitat. She declined my automatic offer of tea, then reconsidered, and asked for something stronger. At 10:30 in the morning, I poured her a finger of Thomas's old scotch, which I kept for medicinal purposes and memories. Her manicured hands shook slightly as she accepted the glass. "I need your help," she finally said after a long sip that made her wince. "The trust fund, Harrison's trust for Oliver, it's been frozen." The pieces clicked into place. Not a reconciliation, not a change of heart. Money. It was always about money with Vivienne. "The Pearson Foundation board has questions about some of the withdrawals I've made," she continued. eyes fixed on the amber liquid in her glass rather than on me. They've suspended access until they complete their review, which could take months. Oliver and I, we need those funds released now. Of course they had questions. The trust Harrison had established through his family's foundation was meant for Oliver's education and well-being, not for whatever extravagances Vivienne deemed necessary for maintaining appearances in Oakridge's elite circles. And why come? To me? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I'm just the unstable old woman you've been protecting Oliver from, remember? She flinched at her own words thrown back at her. Because you're still listed as the trust administrator until Oliver turns 18. The foundation won't release anything without your signature verifying the expenses are legitimate. The irony wasn't lost on me. Harrison had insisted I remain administrator despite our son's blind spot where Vivienne was concerned. Mom, he'd said during one of our last conversations, I love her, but I know who she is. Someone needs to make sure that money goes to Oliver, not to some interior designer or spa retreat. So, I said, setting down my teacup with a decisive clink, you've kept me from even seeing a photograph of my grandson for 8 months, but now you need my signature. Her perfectly glossed lips pressed into a thin line. It's complicated. Eleanor, you know we've had our differences. Differences? The word came out sharper than I intended. Is that what you call accusing me of interfering in your marriage? Of suggesting to my own son that I was growing senile? Of cutting me out of Oliver's life completely after Harrison died? For a moment, genuine anguish crossed her face. I was grieving. We both were. I don't handle things well sometimes. I'd waited 8 months to hear even that meager acknowledgement. But it wasn't enough. Not nearly. Does Oliver even know who I am? I asked quietly. She looked away, out the window to where the maples were surrendering their green to red and gold. He has your picture, the one from Harrison's wallet. A small mercy, then. At least my grandson might recognize me if we ever met again. The thought sent a pang through my chest that had nothing to do with my heart medication. What do you need the money for, Vivienne? Her gaze snapped back to me, suddenly calculating. Various things. School expenses. The house needs repairs. 3 decades as a banker's wife had taught me to recognize evasion. Whatever she needed. The money for? She didn't want to tell me. And whatever it was urgent enough to bring her to my doorstep after months of silence. The grandfather clock in the hall, another piece Harrison had lovingly restored, chimed the half-hour. Its familiar tone steadied me, reminded me of who I was. Eleanor Whitaker, a woman who had buried a husband and now a son, who had run the Lakewood Hills library board for 20 years, who had never once let anger overrule wisdom. I'll need to see Oliver, I said finally. The color drained from her face. Eleanor, I don't think that's not negotiable, I interrupted, surprising us both with my firmness. I won't sign anything until I've seen my grandson. In person. Not a photo, not a video call. I want an afternoon with him. After that, we can discuss the trust. She stood abruptly, her untouched scotch sloshing in the crystal tumbler. You can't make that kind of demand. The trust is for Oliver's benefit, not yours. Yes, I agreed, looking her straight in the eye. And as administrator, I need to verify his well-being before releasing funds. That's my responsibility to Harrison and to Oliver. We were at an impasse, 2 women locked in grief and resentment, with an innocent child caught between us. The clock ticked steadily in the silence. 1 hour, she finally offered. Supervised, at the park near my house. 3 hours, at the Children's Museum in Portland. You can be there, but not hovering over us the entire time. Her jaw tightened, but something in my expression must have told her this wasn't a negotiation. Fine. This Saturday. I'll text you the details. As she gathered her designer purse and walked to the door, I called after her. Vivienne, what does He like these days? Books? Trucks? Animals? She paused, hand on the doorknob. For just a moment the mask slipped, and I glimpsed the young woman my son had fallen in love with. Dinosaurs, she said softly. He knows all their names, even the hard ones. He's very smart, like Harrison. Then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her. I sank back into my armchair, heart racing not from my condition, but from the realization that in 3 days, I would finally meet my grandson properly. The grandson who apparently loved dinosaurs and could pronounce their complicated names. I reached for the phone. There was a bookstore in Portland that carried children's books, and I had some shopping to do. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The tension in my house lingered long after Vivienne's Range Rover disappeared down the winding road. Her perfume, something expensive with notes of jasmine, clung to the armchair where she'd perched like a bird ready for flight. I poured her barely touched scotch down the sink, watching the amber liquid swirl away. Such a waste. Thomas would have scolded me for that. I spent the rest of Tuesday in a fog of disbelief. The grandfather clock chimed each hour, but time felt suspended. By Wednesday morning, doubt had crept in. What if she didn't text the details as promised? What if this was another cruel manipulation? I checked my phone obsessively, a habit my bridge club friends often teased me about. "Eleanor, you check that thing more than my granddaughter does," Marge would say. But no message came. Thursday passed in much the same way. I went through the motions, dusting the bookshelves, attending my weekly volunteer shift at the Lakewood Hills library, preparing my usual simple dinner, all while my phone sat silent and accusing on the kitchen counter. "You're being ridiculous," I told myself as I chopped vegetables for soup. "She needs your signature. She'll contact you." Friday morning, I could stand it no longer. I called Judith, my sister in Vermont. "She's using you," Judith declared immediately after I explained the situation. "The minute you sign those papers, she'll disappear again with that boy." "Oliver," I corrected gently. "His name is Oliver." "Fine, Oliver. The point is, Eleanor, that woman cut you off completely after Harrison died. Now she only wants you for money. You should make her bring the boy to you first, before agreeing to anything." "That's exactly what I did," I said, feeling a small flush of pride at my own assertiveness. "We're meeting tomorrow. At least we're supposed to." Judith's skepticism traveled clearly through the phone line. "And you haven't heard confirmation yet?" "Classic. She's stringing you along." My stomach nodded. "She'll text today. She has to." "Well, call me tomorrow either way," Judith said before hanging up. "And Eleanor, don't let her walk all over you again." With Judith's warning echoing in my ears, I drove to the Portland bookshop I'd mentioned to Vivienne. The Bell Tower Books had been a fixture downtown for decades, with its creaking wooden floors and that distinctive scent of paper and possibility that only real bookstores have. I'd brought Harrison here countless times as a child, letting him pick out treasures while I chatted with old Mr. Bell. Mr. Bell was long gone now, but his daughter Catherine ran the place with the same warmth and encyclopedic knowledge of literature. "Eleanor Whitaker!" she exclaimed when I walked in. Twice in 1 month. What a treat! I'd been here just 2 weeks ago, looking for a novel for my book club. Today's mission was entirely different. "I'm looking for dinosaur books," I explained. "For a 4-year-old boy." Catherine's eyebrows rose slightly. She knew about Harrison's death. Everyone in town did. But I hadn't spoken about having a grandson. "I'm meeting my grandson tomorrow," I added, the words sending a little thrill through me. For the first time, really. He loves dinosaurs. Her face softened. "I have exactly what you need." She led me to the children's section, with its colorful beanbag chairs and mural of storybook characters. "This one has beautiful illustrations and simple facts for his age," she suggested, handing me a large picture book. And this one has flaps and textures. Little ones love those tactile elements. I left with 4 books, plus a small stuffed triceratops that Catherine insisted was the perfect addition. "It's his gateway dinosaur," she winked. "All kids start with triceratops or T-Rex." The shopping bag felt simultaneously too much and not enough. How do you condense months of missed love into a few purchases? What would Oliver think of this stranger bearing gifts, claiming to be his grandmother? My phone buzzed just as I reached my car. My heart leapt, then plummeted when I saw it was only a text from Marge about next week's bridge game. Still nothing. From Vivienne. Back home, I arranged the dinosaur books on the coffee table, then rearranged them, then put them back in the shopping bag. Too eager? Too desperate? What was the protocol here? By dinner time, anxiety had transformed into resignation. She wasn't going to text. Judith had been right. I'd been played for a fool. I was washing my solitary dinner plate when the phone finally chimed with an unknown number. The message was brief, businesslike. "Portland Children's Discovery Museum, 10 a.m. tomorrow. Meet at entrance. He doesn't know who you are yet. We'll explain when you're there." My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped the phone into the soapy water. Tomorrow. It was really happening. I typed and deleted 5 different responses before settling on a simple, "I'll be there." Then added, "Thank you." Sleep was impossible. That night. I tossed and turned, rehearsing what I would say to Oliver. Should I hug him? Would that frighten him? Should I tell him I was his father's mother, or wait for Vivienne's cue? The questions multiplied in the darkness. At 3 a.m., I gave up and padded downstairs. In the soft glow of the side table lamp, I opened our family photo album. There was Harrison, at 4, almost exactly Oliver's age now. The same cowlick at the crown of his head that no amount of combing could tame. His gap-toothed smile as he proudly held up a fish he'd caught with Thomas. School pictures through the years, sports teams, graduation, his wedding to Vivienne. I traced the outline of his face in the wedding photo. He looked so handsome, so happy. Vivienne was radiant beside him, her smile genuine in a way I hadn't seen since. They'd been in love once, truly in love, before ambition and social climbing became her focus. Or perhaps I was being unfair. Perhaps grief had changed her just as it had changed me. The last photo was from Christmas 3 years ago. Harrison holding baby Oliver, both of them wearing ridiculous reindeer antler headbands that Vivienne had protested but eventually given in to. "Mom, take the picture quick before she makes us take these off," Harrison had stage whispered, making me laugh. That was the last Christmas we'd all spent together. The following year, Vivienne had insisted they go to her parents' ski lodge in Vermont. And the Christmas after that, Harrison was gone. A sudden aneurysm that took him in his sleep at just 38 years old. I closed the album gently. No use dwelling on what couldn't be changed. Morning came with rare October sunshine streaming through my bedroom window. I'd finally fallen asleep in the armchair sometime after 4 a.m. and made my way upstairs at dawn. Now I stood before my closet, another dilemma presenting itself. What does one wear to meet their grandson for the first time? I settled on a soft blue cardigan over a simple white blouse, comfortable slacks, and low walking shoes. Practical for a museum, but still put together. I added the silver dragonfly pin that Oliver's small fingers had been fascinated by during those few precious times I'd held him as a baby. The drive to Portland took 40 minutes, but I left a full hour and a half early. Better to sit in the museum parking lot gathering my composure than risk being late. The Children's Discovery Museum was housed in a converted warehouse, its exterior painted with vibrant murals of sea creatures and space exploration. I arrived at 9:15 and claimed a bench near the entrance, the bag of dinosaur books and the stuffed Triceratops beside me. Families began to arrive. Mothers with strollers, fathers carrying toddlers on their shoulders, grandparents holding little hands. Each child that approached made my heart stutter until I confirmed it wasn't Oliver. Tiu. Precisely 9:58, the black Range Rover pulled into a nearby parking space. I straightened my cardigan, checked my lipstick in my compact mirror, and took a deep breath. Vivienne emerged first, looking more put together than she had on Tuesday. Her hair was perfectly styled again, her outfit casual but clearly expensive. She scanned the area before opening the rear passenger door, and then, there he was. Oliver climbed out of his car seat, small sneakers hitting the pavement with a little jump at the end. He wore blue jeans with patches on the knees, a green sweater with a dinosaur on the front, and a backpack shaped like a turtle shell. His hair, lighter than Harrison's had been but with the same cowlick, caught the sunlight. Even from this distance, I could see Harrison in the shape of his face and the way he stood. My eyes blurred with tears that I quickly blinked away. I couldn't fall apart. Not now. Vivienne took his hand and walked toward me, her face a careful mask. Oliver looked up at her, then curiously at me as they approached. I stood on unsteady legs, clutching my purse with white knuckles. "Oliver?" Vivienne said when they reached me, her voice gentler than I'd heard it in years. "This is Ms. Eleanor. She's going to spend some time with us at the museum today. She hesitated, glancing at me uncertainly. "I'm your daddy's mommy," I said softly, kneeling down despite my arthritic knees to be at his eye level. "Which makes me your grandmother." Oliver's eyes, Harrison's eyes, widened as he processed this information. "Like in my picture?" he asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He studied me seriously for a moment, then pointed to my pin. "That's a dragonfly. They can fly backward." Just like that, my frozen heart cracked wide open. "Yes," I managed. "They're quite remarkable, that way." He nodded solemnly, then turned to his mother. "Can we go see the bubble room first?" Vivienne looked at me, a silent question in her eyes. I nodded and picked up my shopping bag. The museum awaited. And somewhere between the bubble room and the dinosaur exhibit, I hoped to begin finding my way into my grandson's life. The Children's Discovery Museum buzzed with weekend energy, shrieks of delight from the water table area, the mechanical whir of the giant marble run, and dozens of conversations creating a symphony of childhood wonder. I followed Oliver and Vivienne through the entrance, watching how my grandson's eyes darted everywhere at once, as if afraid to miss a single marvel. "Bubbles first, then dinosaurs," he declared with the confidence only a 4-year-old can muster when establishing priorities. Vivienne purchased our tickets while I stood slightly apart, not quite family, not quite stranger. The young cashier smiled at me. "Grandmother's day out?" Before I could answer, Oliver piped up. "She's my daddy's mommy." The cashier's smile flickered uncertainly as she glanced between us, surely noting the palpable tension. "Well, that's wonderful. Enjoy your visit." The bubble room was a large space with stations for creating bubbles of every size, from tiny clusters made with multi-holed wands to enormous bubble walls that could envelop a child completely. Oliver made a beeline for a platform where soapy solution pooled around a hoop that could be raised to create a cylindrical bubble. Watch me," he called. Not to Vivienne or even specifically to me, but to the universe at large. He stepped carefully into the center of the platform, waited for a museum volunteer to raise the hoop around him, and stood perfectly still with his arms at his sides as a rainbow-sheened bubble wall formed around him. His face, through the wavering film, was pure joy. When the bubble inevitably popped, showering him with droplets, he squealed with delight. "Did you see? I was inside." "I saw," I said, smiling. "You looked like you were in a magic crystal ball." He considered this seriously. No, it was a force field, like the dinosaurs had in the movie. My knowledge gap must have shown on my face, because Vivienne interjected quietly, "There's a film he loves where scientists bring back dinosaurs but keep them contained with force fields." I nodded, logging away this information like the precious currency it was. Every detail about Oliver felt like recovering something stolen from me. Vivienne maintained a careful distance as we moved through the museum, allowing me moments with Oliver while remaining within eyesight. She checked her phone frequently, her brow furrowing at whatever messages she received. After the bubble room, Oliver led us to the dinosaur exhibit, a woodland-themed space with life-sized models partially hidden among artificial trees and boulders. He ran from display to display, demonstrating his impressive knowledge. That's Parasaurolophus. They had those big crests for making sounds like trumpets, he informed me, pointing to a duck-billed dinosaur. And that one's Ankylosaurus. It has a club tail for smashing T-Rex legs. I listened attentively, asking questions that delighted him with their simplicity. Each answer he gave was delivered with Harrison's same patient tone when explaining something complicated. The resemblance made my throat tighten. "Look, I have something for you," I said during a quiet moment, while Oliver examined fossilized footprints embedded in the floor. I opened my shopping bag and carefully extracted the stuffed triceratops. His eyes widened. "For me?" "Yes, for you. I heard you like dinosaurs." He accepted the plush creature reverently, running small fingers over the 3 horns and bony frill. "His name is Sira," he declared. "Sira," I repeated, puzzled. "From land before time," Vivienne explained from her post several feet away. "It's a cartoon dinosaur he likes." "She," Oliver corrected. "Sira is a girl triceratops. She's brave." "Well, Sira is a perfect name then," I agreed. Oliver tucked the dinosaur under one arm and reached for my hand naturally, as if we'd been doing this for years. "Can we see the space rockets now?" The simple warmth of his small fingers wrapped around mine nearly undid me. How many walks to the park had I missed? How many bedtime stories? How many questions about the world that I should have been there to answer? We spent the next hour exploring the space exhibit, the farm animal area, and a miniature town where children could play at being shopkeepers, doctors, and firefighters. Oliver insisted I be the patient while he wore a too large lab coat and pressed a plastic stethoscope to my wrist. "Your heart is good," he pronounced, "but you need dinosaur medicine." Vivienne, watching from a bench across the play area, almost smiled at this diagnosis. By noon, Oliver's boundless energy began to flag. The museum cafe offered a convenient place to refuel, though the menu was limited to child-friendly basics. We found a small table near a window overlooking the museum's outdoor playground. "Chicken nuggets, please," Oliver requested when Vivienne asked what he wanted. "And milk? Or juice?" she asked. "Chocolate milk," he replied hopefully. She nodded and looked at me. "I can get you something too." It was the first almost kind offer she'd made. "A tea would be lovely, thank you." While Vivienne went to order, I took the dinosaur books from my bag. "I brought these for you too, Oliver. Would you like to look at them while we wait for the food?" His eyes lit up as he opened the first book, the one with textured pages. "This is like my book at home, but mine doesn't have the bumpy scales to touch." He ran his fingers over the embossed skin of a stegosaurus. "Which dinosaur is your very favorite?" I asked. "Triceratops for protection," he said without hesitation. "But Brachiosaurus for gentleness." "Gentleness?" "They only eat leaves and they help the little dinosaurs reach food in tall trees." I marveled at his answer, the way he valued both strength and kindness. Had Harrison taught him that? Or had he somehow arrived at this wisdom himself? Vivienne returned with a tray of food and drinks. "The line was ridiculous," she muttered, setting down Oliver's nuggets and chocolate milk with more care than she handled our adult beverages. "Thank you," I said, accepting the paper cup of tea. Oliver was too engrossed in the dinosaur book to immediately notice the food. Vivienne gently touched his shoulder. Lunch first, books after, okay, buddy? He reluctantly closed the book and reached for a chicken nugget. As he ate, his gaze kept drifting back to the colorful illustrations. He gets that from Harrison, I commented softly. That ability to completely lose himself in books. Something flickered across Vivienne's face. Pain, recognition, perhaps both. Yes, she agreed. Sometimes I have to call his name 3 times when he's reading. It was the first normal mother-to-grandmother comment she'd made, and it hung between us like a fragile bridge. Her phone buzzed again. She checked it, her expression darkening. Excuse me for a moment. I need to make a call. She looked at me pointedly. I'll be right over there by the condiment station. 2 minutes. I nodded, trying not to appear too eager at this unexpected moment alone with Oliver. Once Vivienne stepped away, phone pressed to her ear and voice low but animated, Oliver looked up at me. Are you really my daddy's mommy? He asked. Yes, I said gently. I was your daddy's mommy the same way your mommy is your mommy. He considered this, head tilted in a way so reminiscent of Harrison that it made my heart ache. Where's my daddy? The question I'd been dreading. I glanced at Vivienne, still engaged in what appeared to be an increasingly tense phone conversation. Your daddy was very sick, I said carefully, unsure how much Vivienne had explained. His brain got sick very suddenly, and the doctors couldn't fix it, so he had to go away to heaven. I held my breath, worried I'd said too much or too little. Oliver nodded solemnly. Mommy said his head broke and the angels needed him more than we did. I pressed my lips together, fighting a surge of anger at that explanation, though I supposed it was as good as any for a child this age. Do you have pictures of him? Oliver asked. Many, I assured him. When he was exactly your age, and when he was bigger, and when he was all grown up. Can I see them? If your mommy says it's okay, yes, of course. Oliver seemed satisfied with this answer and returned to his chicken nuggets. I watched him eat, cataloging every detail, the way he saved the most oddly shaped nugget for last, how he kicked his feet against his chair when he was thinking, the small birthmark just behind his right ear that I'd never noticed before. Vivienne returned to the table, her face tight with stress. Everything okay? I asked. Fine, she replied curtly, then made a visible effort to soften her tone. Oliver, slow down with the nuggets, please. Grandma Eleanor has pictures of Daddy. Oliver announced. Can I see them? Vivienne's eyes met mine, a warning in them. Maybe someday, buddy. Right now, let's finish lunch so we can see the rest of the museum before it gets too crowded. Oliver accepted this redirection without protest, but I filed away his use of Grandma Eleanor, the first time he'd referred to me by that title. It felt right in a way nothing had since Harrison died. As we finished our meal, I gathered courage to address what had been unspoken all morning. Vivienne? I think Oliver and I are getting along well. I'd like to schedule regular visits moving forward. Her expression closed immediately. We should discuss that later. When later? After I sign the trust documents? Or will there always be a reason to postpone? I kept my voice gentle, mindful of Oliver listening while flipping through his new dinosaur book. Not now, she hissed, then plastered on a bright smile. All done, Oliver. Let's go see the giant ant farm upstairs. Oliver slid from his chair, carefully tucking Sierra the Triceratops under his arm and reaching for my hand again. Can Grandma Eleanor come too? Vivienne's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course. That's why we're all here today. As we made our way toward the escalator, I felt a mixture of triumph and trepidation. Oliver had accepted me readily, but Vivienne's walls remained firmly in place, and whatever was happening with those phone calls clearly wasn't good news. The trust Fund papers remained unmentioned, hovering between us like an uninvited guest. For now, I was content to follow my grandson to the giant ant farm, his small hand in mine, a victory I'd waited 8 long months to claim. The remainder of our museum visit passed in a delicate dance of unspoken boundaries. Oliver moved between Vivienne and me with the easy adaptability of children, unaware of the undercurrents between the adults in his life. By 3 o'clock, even his boundless energy began to wane. As we watched him yawn while attempting to construct a magnetic bridge, Vivienne checked her watch. "We should probably wrap this up," she said. "He still needs his afternoon nap, or he'll be impossible by dinner." I nodded, trying to hide my disappointment. Our agreed-upon 3 hours had stretched closer to 5, but it still felt woefully inadequate after months of absence. "Of course. Thank you for today." Oliver protested mildly when Vivienne announced it was time to leave, but another yawn undermined his argument. He gathered his new dinosaur books and clutched Sira the Triceratops tightly as we made our way toward the exit. "Will I see you again?" he asked me plainly as we reached the museum's front doors. Vivienne tensed beside him. I looked at her, then back to my grandson's expectant face. "I hope so, very soon," I answered carefully. "I would like that very much." "Tomorrow?" he suggested, with a child's disregard for practicality. Vivienne intervened smoothly. "Not tomorrow." "Buddy, tomorrow is Sunday, and we have church, remember? And then lunch at Grandma and Grandpa Mitchell's." The mention of Vivienne's parents, Oliver's other grandparents who had apparently maintained their access while I was shut out, stung sharply. I swallowed the bitter taste and focused on keeping my expression neutral. "But perhaps next weekend?" I suggested, looking directly at Vivienne. She didn't commit, adjusting the strap of Oliver's small backpack instead. "We'll see. It depends on several things. The trust fund papers." "Of course." We walked to the parking lot together, an awkward little procession. When we reached their Range Rover, Oliver surprised us both by throwing his arms around my legs in a fierce hug. "Bye, Grandma Eleanor. Thank you for Sira and the books. I like the bumpy scale one best." I bent down, ignoring the protest in my knees, and returned his embrace gently. "You're very welcome, Oliver. I loved spending time with you today." Over his head, I met Vivienne's gaze. Something flickered there. Discomfort, jealousy, or perhaps a reluctant recognition that she couldn't undo the connection already forming. "Oliver, hop in your car seat, please," she instructed, opening the rear door. Once he was safely inside with a dinosaur book already open on his lap, Vivienne turned to me, speaking low enough that Oliver couldn't hear. "This wasn't as terrible as I expected," she admitted, which I supposed was as close to a compliment as I would get. "But we still need to discuss the trust situation." "Indeed we do," I agreed. "When would you like to do that?" She glanced at her son in the car, then back to me. "Monday, can you come to our house in Oakridge, around 10 in the morning? Oliver will be at preschool so we can speak freely." An invitation to their home. This was unexpected progress. "I'll be there," I promised. "Just text me the address." She nodded curtly. "I will. And Eleanor, thank you for not making this more difficult than it needed to be." With that cryptic statement, she slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. I stood in the parking lot, watching until the black SUV disappeared around the corner. The drive home felt longer somehow, the coastal route back to Lakewood Hills stretching endlessly before me. My mind replayed every moment with Oliver, cataloging his expressions, his words, the way his small hand had fit so naturally in mine. The radio stayed off. I needed silence to preserve the memory of his voice. When I finally arrived home, the emptiness of the house hit me with unexpected force. After hours in Oliver's vibrant presence, the quiet rooms felt hollow. I set my purse down on the kitchen counter, and noticed the blinking light on my answering machine. Few people still called my landline, but Judith was among the holdouts. Sure enough, her voice filled the kitchen. "Eleanor, it's nearly 6 and I haven't heard from you. I assume either you're still with the boy or the whole thing was a setup, and you're too embarrassed to call me back. Either way, phone me when you get this." I sighed and picked up the receiver, dialing her number from memory. "Finally!" she exclaimed by way of greeting. "Well? How did it go? Was she awful? Was he terrified? Of you? Did she allow you to touch him without sanitizing your hands first?" "Judith," I cut in. "It was wonderful." My voice caught on the word. "He's so much like Harrison. So bright and curious and kind. And Vivienne? Was she her usual charming self?" I lowered myself into a kitchen chair, suddenly aware of how tired I was. Actually, she was civil. Reserved, certainly, and clearly uncomfortable, but she let Oliver interact with me freely. She's invited me to her house on Monday to discuss the trust fund. Judith made a skeptical noise. "So she's softening you up before asking for money." Classic manipulation. "Perhaps," I conceded. "But she did allow today to happen. And Oliver called me Grandma Eleanor without any prompting." "Well, don't get too comfortable. Remember, this is the woman who kept you from your grandson for 8 months, and only reached out when she needed something." I sighed, too drained for Judith's perpetual cynicism. "I'm well aware of what she did, but continuing that hostility won't help anyone, least of all Oliver." "Just be careful, Eleanor. Get specifics about the trust fund situation. Don't sign anything without reading the fine print twice." After promising appropriate caution, I ended the call and made myself a simple dinner of soup and toast. As I ate, I flipped through the photo album again, finding new points of resemblance between Harrison and Oliver now that I'd spent time with my grandson. The same slight dimple in the right cheek when they smiled. The identical way they furrowed their brow when concentrating. Later, as darkness settled outside my windows, I called Catherine at Bell Tower Books, catching her just before closing. "Eleanor, how did it go with your grandson?" "Wonderfully," I told her. "He loved the books, especially the one with the textured pages, and the Triceratops was perfect. Apparently it's his favorite." "I'm so glad," Catherine said warmly. "Will you be seeing him regularly now?" The question hovered painfully. "I hope so. It's complicated." After hanging up, I sat in the living room with only a single lamp lit, watching the moon rise over the distant water. An idea began to form, a way to ensure that today wasn't a one-time occurrence, regardless of what happened with the trust fund. Monday morning arrived with a persistent drizzle that beaded on my car windshield faster than the wipers could clear. Yet the drive to Oakridge took nearly an hour, the exclusive community situated on the opposite side of Portland from my modest coastal town. Vivienne's text had arrived Sunday afternoon with an address and a terse reminder. 10 a.m. tomorrow. Please be punctual. As if I would be late for something this important. Oakridge announced its exclusivity subtly but unmistakably. The entrance featured tasteful stone pillars rather than a gate, but the message was clear. This place was for a certain class of people. The homes were set back from the winding roads, glimpsed through carefully landscaped screens of native trees and shrubs. Vivienne and Harrison's house, though I supposed it was just Vivienne's now, sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, an imposing structure of stone and cedar that looked like it belonged in an architectural magazine. 3 stories of sharp angles and walls of glass faced a protected woodland ravine, a far cry from the modest colonial they'd lived in when Harrison was alive. Parked in the circular driveway behind a silver Mercedes that I didn't recognize. Perhaps Vivienne had company, though the timing seemed odd given our scheduled discussion. Before I could ring the bell, the massive front door swung open to reveal Vivienne, immaculately dressed in a cream cashmere sweater and tailored pants. Her expression was guarded but not hostile. "Eleanor, please come in," The foyer soared 2 stories high, dominated by a modern chandelier that resembled a constellation of glass bubbles. The space was beautiful but sterile, like a museum rather than a home where a small child lived. "You have a lovely home?" I offered politely. "Thank you. We can talk in the kitchen." I followed her through the house, noting the absence of personal photographs or the usual cheerful clutter that accompanies life with a child. Everything was arranged with precision. Art pieces that likely cost more than my car, furniture that looked more sculptural than functional. The kitchen was a chef's dream of marble and stainless steel. Vivienne gestured toward one of the stools. "At the massive island?" "Coffee," she offered, already moving toward an elaborate espresso machine. "Tea, if you have it." She nodded and began preparing our drinks with efficient movements. The silence stretched uncomfortably until another person entered the kitchen, a man in his early 40s, wearing an expensive-looking suit slightly rumpled from sitting. He carried a leather portfolio and had the polished but slightly harried look of a busy professional. "Eleanor, this is James Harrington," Vivienne said, "my financial advisor. I hadn't expected a third party at our meeting, and my surprise must have shown." "Mrs. Whitaker," he greeted me, extending his hand. "Thank you for coming today. I understand there's been some confusion regarding the Pearson Foundation Trust for Oliver." "Not confusion on my part," I replied carefully, shaking his hand. "I'm quite clear on the terms of the trust Harrison established." Vivienne placed a cup of tea before me, her movements precise. "James is here to help explain the situation we're facing and to outline some possible solutions." "I see." I took a small sip of the tea, some herbal blend that tasted vaguely of berries. "And what exactly is the situation? You mentioned the trust being frozen." James placed his portfolio on the counter and extracted several documents. "The Pearson Foundation has raised concerns about certain withdrawals made over the past 6 months, he explained in a practiced, neutral tone. "As you know, the trust specifies that funds are to be used exclusively for Oliver's education, healthcare, and general welfare." Yes, I'm aware of the terms. Harrison had been explicit about this, knowing Vivienne's tendency toward extravagance. "There have been several large withdrawals that the Foundation's trustees have flagged as potentially outside those parameters," James continued. "As a result, they've suspended access pending review, which could take months to complete." "What sort of withdrawals?" I asked directly. Vivienne shifted uncomfortably. James glanced at her before answering. "The most significant was for home renovations, specifically the creation of an educational space for Oliver and some safety improvements to the property." "A $175,000 educational space?" I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. "The renovations included a specialized playroom designed by child development experts," Vivienne interjected defensively, "and security upgrades throughout the property. Oliver's safety and development are paramount." I nodded slowly, taking another sip of tea to gather my thoughts. "And the other withdrawals?" James cleared his throat. "There were payments to a private preschool, which would normally be approved, but the amount included what appears to be a substantial donation to their building fund. Also, several payments to a decorator and some significant travel expenses." "Educational travel," Vivienne added quickly. "We took Oliver to the Natural History Museum in New York, and to visit the dinosaur exhibits in Chicago and Boston." The picture was becoming clearer. Vivienne had been using the trust as a personal slush fund, justifying lavish expenses under the guise of Oliver's welfare. No wonder the Pearson Foundation had intervened. "And now you need me to tell the Foundation that these expenses were legitimate," I stated flatly. "We need you to sign off on these as Oliver's trust administrator," James corrected. "The Foundation requires your verification that these expenses are in line with the spirit of the trust." "But they aren't," I said simply. "Harrison intended that money for Oliver's future, not for luxury renovations or cross-country museum trips that a 4-year-old won't even remember." Vivienne's composure cracked slightly. "This house is for Oliver's future. Everything I do is For him to give him the life Harrison would have wanted, I doubted that very much. Harrison had been raised with modest means and valued experiences over possessions. This showcase home with its perfect furnishings and educational enhancements felt nothing like the future he would have envisioned for his son. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. James slid a document across the counter. "This letter states that as trust administrator, you've reviewed the questioned expenditures and found them consistent with the trust's purpose of providing for Oliver's education and welfare." I glanced over the letter without picking it up. "And if I sign this?" "The foundation will unfreeze the trust and normal access to funds will resume," he explained. "They hold your judgment in high regard, Mrs. Whitaker. Perhaps because I'd never given them reason to doubt it before." I looked at Vivienne, who was watching me with barely concealed anxiety. "And if I don't sign?" Her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. "Then we continue in financial limbo for months while they conduct their review. Meanwhile, Oliver's preschool tuition comes due, and I've already had to postpone several of his activities because I can't access the funds." I took a deep breath. "I think I need some time to consider this." "Time?" Vivienne's voice rose sharply. "There isn't time, Eleanor. Oliver's next preschool payment is due Friday, and they've already granted one extension." James shifted uncomfortably, straightening papers that didn't need straightening. "Perhaps I should step out and let you two discuss this privately." "No," Vivienne said quickly. "Stay. We need to resolve this today." I studied my daughter-in-law's face. The polished exterior was beginning to crack, revealing something I hadn't expected to see: genuine fear. Not just anxiety or irritation, but something deeper. "Vivienne," I said carefully, "are you in financial trouble beyond the frozen trust?" Her eyes darted to James, then back to me. That's not relevant to the current situation, but her non-answer told me everything. Harrison had left a substantial life insurance policy, and Vivienne had a successful career in real estate development. This house, however, must have stretched those resources to the breaking point. And now, without access to Oliver's trust, to supplement her lifestyle choices, the careful facade was crumbling. "I think it's very relevant," I countered gently. "If you're using Oliver's trust to cover personal financial shortfalls, that's precisely why the foundation has intervened." James cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitaker, while I understand your concerns, I can assure you that Mrs. Pearson is committed to Oliver's well-being. These expenditures, while perhaps broader than strictly necessary, were made with his interests in mind." I'd had enough of the diplomatic doublespeak. "May I see the full accounting of withdrawals from the trust over the past year?" Vivienne tensed, but James nodded. "Of course, I have that right here." He extracted another document from his portfolio and slid it across to me. The list was longer than I'd expected. Beyond the major items already mentioned, there were countless smaller withdrawals: designer children's clothing, a child-sized electric car, membership to an exclusive children's activity center, and most tellingly, payments to a landscaping service and interior decorator that had nothing to do with Oliver at all. I looked up from the paper. "Vivienne, these expenses go well beyond Oliver's needs or Harrison's intentions for the trust. You don't get to dictate how I raise my son," she snapped, her cool facade finally shattering. "This trust is for Oliver's benefit, and I decide what benefits him." "Actually," I said quietly, "the trust document specifies that I, as administrator, make that determination." Harrison was very clear about that. Her cheeks flushed with anger. "Because he didn't trust me, his own wife. Because he knew you had different values when it came to money and raising children," I corrected. "He loved you, Vivienne. He just recognized that your spending priorities weren't always aligned with his." "So what now?" she demanded. "You'll punish Oliver to prove a point about my character?" "I would never punish Oliver," I said firmly. "But I won't betray Harrison's wishes either." James intervened, his tone conciliatory. "Perhaps we could find a compromise. Mrs. Whitaker, would you be willing to approve some of the expenditures while putting stricter controls in place moving forward?" I considered this. I'd be willing to approve legitimate educational expenses, the preschool tuition, though not the donation to their building fund, and reasonable costs for activities that directly benefit Oliver. "And the house renovations?" Vivienne pressed. "I'd need to see them," I replied. "If there's truly an educational space designed for him, I might approve a portion of those costs, but not without verification." "You want to inspect my home?" The indignation in her voice couldn't quite mask the underlying panic. "I want to see what my grandson's life is like," I corrected. "Where he plays, where he sleeps. What constitutes this educational space that cost more than most people's entire homes?" James looked between us, clearly sensing the mounting tension. "Perhaps we could schedule a walkthrough later this week. That would give Mrs. Pearson time to prepare the relevant information about the renovations." Vivienne stood abruptly. "This is ridiculous. You're treating me like a criminal." "No one is accusing you of anything illegal," I said evenly. "But the trust has specific purposes, and as administrator, I need to ensure those purposes are being honored." She paced the kitchen, fingers tugging at the pendant hanging from her neck. It was a nervous habit I'd seen before, but rarely. Vivienne usually maintained iron control over such telling gestures. "Fine," she said finally. "You want to see the renovations? Let's do it now." I blinked, surprised by the sudden capitulation. "Now? Why not? Oliver's at school until 3. We have plenty of time." I glanced at James, who looked equally taken aback. "I can reschedule my noon appointment if needed," he offered. "That won't be necessary," Vivienne said dismissively. "This won't take long." She turned to me with a challenging stare. "Well, ready for the grand tour?" I set down my teacup and stood. "Lead the way." She guided me through the main floor first, a formal living room that looked untouched, a dining room with seating for 12, a home office with expensive ergonomic furniture. None of these spaces showed evidence of a child's presence. "These are the common areas," she explained unnecessarily. "We entertain business associates here occasionally." I nodded, noting the strategic use of "we," though Harrison was gone. We ascended a floating staircase to the second floor, where the master suite occupied one wing and several guest rooms lined a long hallway. "Oliver's spaces are on the 3rd floor," Vivienne said, continuing upward. The top floor was a revelation. While the lower levels had been sleek and minimalist, this entire floor had been transformed into a child's paradise. One enormous room served as a playroom, with different zones for various activities, a reading nook with built-in bookshelves, a dress-up area with a small stage, an art station with easels and supply cabinets, and a construction zone with architectural, blocks and engineering toys. Most impressive was the Dinosaur Museum, a detailed diorama built into one wall with glass-fronted display cases containing fossils and high-quality models. Informational placards accompanied each display, though I wondered how much of the text Oliver could actually read at 4. "This is what they objected to?" I asked, genuinely surprised by the thoughtfulness of the space. "Part of it," Vivienne admitted. "The specialists who designed it weren't cheap, but Oliver spends hours up here. It's stimulating his development in ways ordinary toys can't." Adjacent to the playroom was Oliver's bedroom, more modest in scale but equally well-appointed. With a custom bed shaped like a safari jeep and walls painted to resemble a prehistoric landscape, dinosaurs of all sizes populated the room, from tiny models lined up on shelves to a life-sized velociraptor sculpture in one corner. "He loves dinosaurs," Vivienne said, a touch defensively. "I can see that." I moved to examine framed certificates. On one wall, completion of various enrichment programs, all bearing Oliver's name: swimming, early music education, junior science explorers. My grandson was being groomed for achievement from every angle. The third room on this floor held the biggest surprise: a fully equipped classroom space with a teacher's desk, a smartboard, learning stations, and child-sized furniture organized in clusters. "What's this for?" I asked. "I thought Oliver attended preschool." Vivienne hesitated. "He does, 3 days a week. But I've arranged for private instruction the other 2 days. His regular school is excellent for socialization, but their academic curriculum is inadequate." I raised an eyebrow. "He's 4. Vivienne, and already reading at a first-grade level," she countered. "Harrison was the same way, brilliant, curious, always ahead of his peers. I won't let Oliver's potential be stifled by standardized education." The comparison to Harrison gave me pause. She was right that my son had been an early reader, hungry for knowledge from a young age. But Harrison had also spent countless hours building forts in the woods, collecting insects, and playing pickup baseball with neighborhood children. His education had been balanced with unstructured time and simple joys. I walked slowly around the classroom, taking in the expensive educational materials and the rigorous schedule posted on one wall. Music theory, introduction to Spanish, basic coding concepts, all admirable subjects but overwhelming for a preschooler. "The specialists recommended this approach," Vivienne said, watching my reaction. "They said children with Oliver's aptitude need constant stimulation, or they become frustrated and act out." "And does he enjoy all this?" I asked. Something flickered across her face, doubt perhaps, or defensiveness. "Of course, he's thriving." I gestured toward the schedule. "When does he just play? Run around outside? Make mud pies?" "The playground at his preschool provides plenty of physical activity," she replied stiffly. "And we have structured outdoor time with his sports coaches." Sports coaches, plural, for a 4-year-old. We returned downstairs in silence, both processing the tour in our own ways. James waited in the kitchen, reviewing documents while we'd been gone. "Well?" Vivienne demanded when we reached the main floor. "Are you satisfied now? Will you sign the approval for the foundation?" I took a deep breath. "I'll approve the educational expenses, the preschool tuition, the legitimate learning materials, even a reasonable portion of the playroom renovation. But not all of this, Vivienne. It's excessive." "Excessive?" she repeated incredulously. "Providing the best possible environment for my son is excessive? When it's funded by depleting the trust meant to secure his future? Yes," I replied firmly. "Oliver doesn't need 3 sports coaches and private tutors at 4 years old. He needs time to be a child." "What would you know about what he needs?" she snapped. "You've been absent for 8 months, not by choice," I reminded her quietly. The accusation hung in the air between us, undeniable. James cleared his throat, attempting to diffuse the tension. "Perhaps we could draft a compromise agreement," he suggested, outlining specifically which expenses Mrs. Whitaker will approve and establishing clear guidelines for future withdrawals. Vivienne crossed her arms. "And what about the immediate issue? Oliver's preschool tuition is due in 4 days." "I'll approve that today," said. "And we can work out the rest over the next week or so." James nodded, visibly relieved. "That seems reasonable. I can draft the necessary documents this afternoon." "Fine," Vivienne conceded, though her posture remained rigid with displeasure. "But I want something in return." I raised an eyebrow. "And what would that be?" "A formal visitation agreement," she said. "If you're going to have oversight of Oliver's trust, I want clear boundaries about your role in his life. Scheduled visits, my approval for any gifts or outings, my presence during your time with him." The request caught me off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. "You're offering visitation rights in exchange for financial approval." "I'm being practical," she countered. "We both know Oliver enjoyed meeting you. I'm not cruel, Eleanor. I don't want to keep him from knowing his grandmother. but I need structure and clear expectations. I considered her offer carefully. On one hand, it felt manipulative, using Oliver as a bargaining chip. On the other, it was the first concrete offer of ongoing contact with my grandson. "I'll consider it," I said finally, "but I won't sign anything about the trust until we've reached a mutually acceptable agreement about Oliver." Her eyes narrowed slightly, calculating. "Then we're at an impasse." "Not necessarily," I replied. "Why don't you have your lawyer draft a visitation proposal, and I'll review it alongside the trust documents. We can reconvene later this week to finalize both matters." Before she could respond, the doorbell chimed through the house. Vivienne frowned, checking her watch. "That's odd. I'm not expecting anyone." She excused herself to answer the door. James and I sat in awkward silence, both aware that we were in the middle of delicate negotiations with no clear resolution in sight. Minutes later, Vivienne returned to the kitchen, her expression a mix of annoyance and resignation. Behind her walked a tall man in his early 40s with a familiar bearing that made my heart skip a beat. Harrison's cousin, Robert Pearson, the current head of the Pearson Foundation. "Eleanor," he greeted me warmly. "I thought I might find you here?" "Robert?" I managed, rising from my seat. "This is unexpected." Robert Pearson's smile was Harrison's smile. The same dimple in the right cheek, the same slight crinkle around the eyes. Unlike Harrison's warm brown eyes, though, Robert's were a penetrating blue that missed nothing. He was dressed casually in a navy blazer over a light sweater, projecting the effortless elegance that came with old family money. "I apologize for the intrusion," he said, though his tone suggested he felt no such compunction. "When I heard you were meeting about Oliver's trust, I thought it might be helpful if I joined the conversation. As a trustee of the foundation, I mean." James had also risen to his feet, extending his hand. "James Harrington, Mrs. Pearson's financial advisor. We've spoken on the phone." "Of course," Robert acknowledged with a brief handshake, before turning back to me. "Eleanor, you're looking well. It's been too long." Indeed, it had. I hadn't seen Robert since Harrison's funeral, where he'd expressed his condolences and promised to keep an eye on things regarding Oliver's inheritance. Apparently, he'd been doing exactly that. Vivienne's displeasure was evident in the tight set of her shoulders. "Robert, we were in the middle of a private discussion about a trust administered by our family foundation," he countered smoothly. "I'd say that makes it foundation business." I'd forgotten how adept the Pearsons were at polite confrontation. Harrison had been the gentlest of them, but even he could wield courtesy like a rapier when necessary. "Please, join us," I said, gesturing to an empty stool at the kitchen island. We were just discussing which expenses from the trust should be approved moving forward. Robert took the offered seat, nodding thanks as Vivienne reluctantly poured him coffee. "And what conclusions have you reached?" James began to summarize our discussion, but Vivienne interrupted. "Eleanor has agreed to approve Oliver's preschool tuition," she said firmly. "The rest is still under negotiation." Robert raised an eyebrow, looking between us. "I see. And the foundation's concerns about the home renovations and other questionable withdrawals?" "I've just toured the renovations," I explained. "Some aspects are genuinely educational and beneficial for Oliver. Others seem excessive." "The foundation's trustees felt the same way," Robert agreed. "Particularly the $75,000 for landscaping and exterior lighting that somehow fell under child safety improvements." Vivienne's cheeks flushed. "This property backs up to a ravine. The lighting and fencing were necessary security measures." "And the koi pond with custom waterfall feature?" Robert inquired mildly. "Also a security measure?" I glanced at Vivienne, wondering how she would justify that particular expense. She met my gaze briefly before looking away. "Oliver finds it soothing. His therapist recommended water features for anxiety reduction." This was the first I'd heard of Oliver seeing a therapist. Oliver has anxiety issues? I asked, genuinely concerned. Vivienne hesitated just a fraction too long. He's had some difficulty adjusting since Harrison's death. Nothing serious, but we're being proactive. Robert set his coffee cup down with deliberate care. Vivienne, let's be candid. The foundation froze the trust because you've been systematically using it to fund a lifestyle that goes well beyond Oliver's legitimate needs. Harrison established this trust to secure his son's future, not to provide you with a bottomless resource for home improvements and luxury purchases. How dare you? She hissed. Everything I've done has been for Oliver. Including the trip to Paris Fashion Week that you categorized as cultural education? Robert challenged. Or the spa retreat in Arizona listed as parental wellness support. I felt my heart sink as these new revelations emerged. The list I'd seen earlier clearly hadn't included all the questionable expenses. James shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Pearson, some of these expenditures can be reclassified if necessary. We're prepared to work with the foundation to resolve any concerns. I'm sure you are, Robert replied coolly. Especially now that your client's primary source of liquidity has been suspended. The implication hung in the air. Vivienne was in deeper financial trouble than she'd admitted. James didn't contradict the assessment, which told me everything I needed to know. Eleanor. Robert turned to me, his expression softening slightly. The foundation respected Harrison's wishes in naming you as trust administrator. We've tried to remain hands-off, but the pattern of spending over the past year forced our intervention. We need to know if you're willing to take a more active role in overseeing this trust, or if we should petition the court for an independent administrator. The stakes suddenly became crystal clear. If I declined to properly manage the trust, I might lose what little leverage I had for maintaining a relationship with Oliver. But taking on the role meant direct conflict with Vivienne, which could be equally damaging to my access. I believe I can manage the responsibilities, I said carefully, but I'll need complete transparency about the trust's finances moving forward, and I'd like to establish a regular schedule for reviewing proposed expenditures. Robert nodded, satisfied. The foundation would welcome that approach. Vivienne stood abruptly. This is absurd. You're treating me like I can't be trusted with my own son's welfare. Not at all, I said, trying to keep my tone gentle. But the trust has specific purposes, and we need to honor Harrison's intentions. Harrison would want Oliver to have the best of everything, she insisted. Harrison would want Oliver to have balance, I countered. Education and opportunity, yes, but also time to just be a child, to play without structure sometimes, to learn that happiness doesn't come from expensive things. Something flickered across her face, a recognition perhaps that I had indeed known my son well. Robert cleared his throat. There's another matter we should discuss while I'm here. The foundation recently completed a financial review of all our family trusts, including Oliver's. Vivienne tensed visibly. And we've identified a significant discrepancy, he continued, withdrawing a folder from his leather messenger bag. Approximately $230,000 appears to have been transferred from Oliver's trust to a personal account in your name, Vivienne. This transfer occurred 3 months ago and was processed directly through the bank, bypassing the foundation's normal approval channels. The color drained from Vivienne's face. That was an emergency situation. I intended to replace those funds. James looked stricken, turning to his client. This is the first I'm hearing of this transfer. Because I handled it personally, she snapped. It didn't concern you. Robert's expression remained neutral, but his tone hardened slightly. It concerns all of us when trust funds established for a child's future are misappropriated. The foundation has a fiduciary responsibility to protect those assets. I did not misappropriate anything, Vivienne insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. As Oliver's mother and legal guardian, I have the right to make decisions about his financial needs. Not unilaterally, and not without the trust administrator's approval, Robert corrected. Eleanor, Did you authorize this transfer? No, I said quietly. I knew nothing about it. The kitchen fell silent. Even the expensive refrigerator seemed to hold its mechanical breath. This puts us in a difficult position, Robert finally said. Under normal circumstances, the foundation would be obligated to pursue legal action to recover those funds. Vivienne's hands gripped the edge of the counter, knuckles white. You wouldn't dare. It's not about daring, he replied evenly. It's about fiduciary responsibility. However, given that you're Oliver's mother and Harrison's widow, I've convinced the other trustees to consider an alternative approach. Which is? She asked, barely audible. A structured repayment plan, combined with much stricter oversight of the trust, Robert explained. You would need to provide a full accounting of where those funds went and establish a timeline for their return. Additionally, all future expenditures from the trust would require dual approval from both Eleanor and the foundation. Vivienne looked trapped, her carefully constructed world collapsing around her. And if I refuse? Then the foundation will have no choice but to pursue legal remedies, Robert said simply, which could potentially involve criminal charges for misappropriation of fiduciary funds. James intervened, his professional instincts finally overcoming his shock. Perhaps we should take some time to consider these options. This is clearly a complex situation that requires careful deliberation. Of course, Robert agreed. The foundation can give you until the end of the week to provide an initial response, but the trust will remain frozen until this matter is resolved, with the exception of Oliver's immediate educational expenses, which Eleanor has already agreed to approve. I watched Vivienne throughout this exchange, seeing something break behind her eyes. For the first time since I'd known her, the polished facade had completely crumbled, revealing not just fear, but desperation. May I have a moment alone with Eleanor? She asked suddenly. Robert and James exchanged glances, then nodded. We'll wait in the living room, Robert said, rising from his stool. James followed, closing the kitchen door behind them. As soon as they were gone, Vivienne seemed to deflate, sinking onto a stool with her head in her hands. Several moments passed in silence before she looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but dry. I'm in trouble, Eleanor, she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Serious financial trouble. I waited, sensing she needed to continue without interruption. After Harrison died, I couldn't stay in our old house. Every corner held memories. I kept expecting to hear his key in the lock, his voice calling out. She gestured vaguely at our surroundings. This place was supposed to be a fresh start for Oliver and me, somewhere without ghosts. It's a beautiful home, I said neutrally. It's a beautiful prison, she corrected bitterly. I'm underwater on the mortgage. The real estate market collapsed right after I closed on this place. And my income, she trailed off, shaking her head. Your real estate development work? I prompted. My company hasn't closed a major deal in 18 months. The investment group I was counting on pulled out after our last project went over budget. I've been living on credit and... She hesitated. And Oliver's trust. The admission hung heavily between us. The $230,000, I said. What was it for? She met my eyes directly for the first time. To prevent foreclosure on this house, and to settle some personal debts that were becoming problematic. Oh, Vivienne, I sighed. Why didn't you ask for help? Ask who? She demanded, a flash of her old defiance returning. My parents are comfortable but not wealthy, and you... She stopped, abruptly. And me? I prompted. And you, she continued more quietly. We're Harrison's mother. The one he always turned to. The one he trusted more than his own wife, apparently, since he made you the trust administrator instead of me. The hurt and resentment in her voice was palpable. All this time, I'd thought her exclusion of me after Harrison's death was about control, or perhaps her need to establish independence. But underneath lay something more profound: jealousy of the bond I'd shared with my son, and perhaps shame that he hadn't trusted her with their child's financial future. "Harrison loved you deeply," I said gently. "But he knew money wasn't always straightforward for you. He wanted to protect both you and Oliver by creating some structure around the finances." She looked away. "He made me feel like a child who couldn't be trusted with her allowance." "That wasn't his intention," I insisted. "He was trying to remove potential stress from your relationship. Money arguments destroy marriages, Vivienne. He wanted to avoid that." "Well, he's gone now," she said flatly, "and I'm left with a mess I can't fix and a foundation threatening legal action against Oliver's mother. How would Harrison feel about that?" The unfairness of the accusation stung, but I pushed past it. "What do you want from me, Vivienne? Why did you ask to speak privately?" She took a deep breath, visibly collecting herself. "I need your help, Eleanor. Not just with approving the legitimate expenses, but with restructuring everything. If Robert and the foundation pursue this aggressively, I could lose Oliver." The thought sent a chill through me. Surely it wouldn't come to that. Child Protective Services takes a dim view of parents who misappropriate their children's assets, she said grimly. "Especially amounts this large." "What are you asking me to do?" "Work with me, not against me," she said, leaning forward intently. "Help me establish a repayment plan the foundation will accept. Approve emergency funds so I can keep this house until I can sell it for a reasonable price. And most importantly, don't let them take Oliver away from me. He's already lost his father. He can't lose me too." Her vulnerability in this moment seemed genuine, though I couldn't forget how skillfully she'd manipulated situations in the past. Still, for Oliver's sake, I needed to find a path forward. "I'll help with the repayment plan," I agreed cautiously. "And I'll advocate for keeping this matter private, away from authorities that might separate you and Oliver. But Vivienne, there have to be conditions." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What conditions?" "Complete financial transparency moving forward. A reasonable visitation schedule for me with Oliver. And you need to downsize significantly. This house, the multiple activities, the private tutors, it's not sustainable, and it's not what Oliver needs most right now." She was silent for a long moment, weighing her options, though in truth, she had few left. Finally, she nodded once, a sharp downward jerk of her chin. "Fine. But I want your word that you won't try to take Oliver from me." "I have never wanted to take Oliver from you," I said firmly. "I only want to be part of his life. To know my grandson and share what I can of his father with him." Something in my tone must have reached her because her expression softened fractionally. "Harrison always said you were fair to a fault, that you could see all sides of an argument even when you were directly involved in it." "He was generous in his assessment," I replied. "Shall we invite Robert and James back in to discuss next steps?" She nodded, then paused. "Eleanor, thank you for not immediately siding with the foundation against me." I studied her face, wondering if this moment of connection was genuine or another tactical move. With Vivienne, it was often impossible to tell, but for Oliver's sake, and yes, for Harrison's memory, I would try to navigate this complicated relationship with as much grace as I could muster. "We're the two most important women in Oliver's life," I said simply. "He needs us to find a way forward together." She reached for the kitchen door, then turned back with a question that caught me off guard. Did Harrison ever doubt that I loved him? Truly loved him, not just what he represented? The naked vulnerability in the question made my heart ache. "No," I answered truthfully. "He never doubted that. Not once." She nodded once, blinking rapidly, then opened the door to call the men back in. Whatever happened next, something fundamental had shifted between us. Whether it would lead to lasting change remained to be seen. The meeting that followed lasted nearly 3 hours. Robert proved to be both thorough and uncompromising in his approach to Oliver's trust, though not without compassion. By afternoon's end, we had hammered out a preliminary agreement. Vivienne would repay the misappropriated funds over 3 years with modest interest. The house would be placed on the market once the spring buying season began, with a portion of proceeds going directly back into Oliver's trust. In the meantime, I would approve legitimate educational and healthcare expenses, while a foundation accountant would conduct monthly reviews of all trust-related transactions. As for my visitation with Oliver, Vivienne reluctantly agreed to a schedule, every other Saturday from 10 until 4, initially supervised but transitioning to independent visits after 3 months if all went well. Additionally, I would be included in special occasions like his birthday and school performances. When Robert and James finally departed, Vivienne and I sat in her kitchen, emotionally drained but with a fragile framework for moving forward. The late afternoon sun slanted through the massive windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the golden light. "Oliver will be home from preschool soon," Vivienne said, checking her watch. "His nanny picks him up at 3. "You have a nanny?" I asked, surprised this hadn't been mentioned during our financial discussions. "Part-time," she clarified. 3 afternoons a week. She's a graduate student in early childhood education. She hesitated. "Would you like to stay? See Oliver again?" The invitation, unexpected and therefore all the more precious, caught me off guard. "I'd love that, if it wouldn't confuse him. I'll explain you're his grandmother and you'll be visiting regularly now." She stood, gathering coffee cups and placing them in the sink with mechanical precision. "I should warn you, he'll probably talk your ear off about his day. He notices everything." "Just like Harrison," I murmured. Vivienne paused, her back to me. "Yes," she agreed softly, "just like him." We spent the next half hour in a strange, exhausted truce, straightening the kitchen and discussing practicalities, which preschool expenses needed immediate attention, what Oliver might enjoy doing during our Saturday visits, how to explain the eventual move to a more modest home. At precisely 3:30, the front door opened, followed by the sound of small running feet and an excited voice calling, "Mom! Mom! We found a caterpillar that was this big!" Oliver burst into the kitchen, arms flung wide to demonstrate the clearly exaggerated size of his discovery. He skidded to a stop when he saw me, his eyes widening in recognition. "Grandma Eleanor!" he exclaimed, then looked uncertainly between his mother and me. "Are you visiting again?" "Yes," I smiled. "I thought I'd say hello since I was talking with your mom today." Behind Oliver, a young woman with a neat ponytail and sensible shoes appeared, carrying his backpack and a folder of papers. "Mrs. Pearson, Oliver had a great day today. Ms. Abernathy sent home a note about the science fair next month." Vivienne took the folder, introducing me with surprising naturalness. "Lisa, this is Oliver's grandmother, Eleanor Whitaker. She'll be visiting regularly, now." If the nanny found this development surprising after 8 months of my absence, she hid it well. "It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Whitaker. Oliver, should we hang up your jacket before you tell your mom and grandma about the caterpillar?" Oliver didn't need to be asked twice. He launched into a detailed account of the classroom caterpillar, habitat, complete with scientific names that he pronounced with careful precision. I listened, enchanted by his animation and the familiar way his hands moved expressively, just like Harrison's had. When he paused for breath, I asked, "And where will the caterpillar live until it becomes a butterfly?" "Moths," he corrected importantly. "Our caterpillars are going to be Luna moths, not butterflies. They have those see-through wings with the big eye spots for scaring birds." "I stand corrected," I said seriously. "Moths, then. Where will they live?" He described the classroom habitat in meticulous detail, from the specially selected branches to the mesh covering that would allow the moths to hang properly when they emerged from their cocoons. His knowledge was impressive for a 4-year-old, though I couldn't help wondering if a bit less scientific precision and a bit more finger painting might serve him equally well at this age. Lisa excused herself once Oliver's things were put away, with a reminder to Vivienne about a field trip permission slip that needed signing. Left alone with us, Oliver seemed uncertain for a moment, glancing between his mother and me as if trying to decode this new dynamic. "Oliver," Vivienne said, kneeling to his eye level, "Grandma Eleanor is going to start visiting you regularly. Every other Saturday you'll spend the day together." His face brightened. "Like today at the museum?" "Similar to that," she nodded. "You might go to different places or sometimes visit at Grandma's house." He considered this information solemnly. "Does Grandma Eleanor have dinosaurs at her house?" I laughed. "Not yet, but I'm sure we could arrange for some to visit." This seemed to satisfy him. His attention shifted suddenly, as children's often does. "Can I show Grandma Eleanor my dinosaur room?" Vivienne hesitated briefly, then nodded. "For a little while, but then Grandma needs to go home and you need your afternoon snack." Oliver grabbed my hand, tugging me toward the stairs with surprising strength. "Come on, you haven't seen my dino." "Lab!" I followed him upstairs, his small hand warm in mine, his voice chattering excitedly about the treasures that awaited. The third-floor playroom I'd toured earlier transformed through Oliver's eyes, each feature alive with stories and significance. "This is where the herbivores live," he explained, showing me a diorama section with plant-eating dinosaurs arranged among miniature trees. "And over here is the danger zone where the carnivores hunt." I listened attentively, asking questions that delighted him with their simplicity. His knowledge was impressive, but more endearing was his pure enthusiasm. When he showed me a complex dinosaur model he'd assembled with help from his tutor, pride radiated from him. "Your daddy loved building models too," I told him. "When he was a little older than you, he built an entire miniature city in our basement." Oliver's eyes widened. "Really? With skyscrapers?" "With everything. Skyscrapers, houses, a train that ran through tunnels, even tiny streetlights that really worked." "Do you have pictures?" he asked eagerly. "I do at my house. I can bring them next time I visit." His face grew serious. "Mom says Daddy is in heaven. Does that mean he can't come back?" The question pierced me with its innocent directness. I glanced toward the doorway, wondering if Vivienne was listening, unsure how she'd want me to address this. But we were alone, and Oliver was waiting, his eyes, Harrison's eyes, fixed on my face. "That's right, sweetheart," I said gently. "When people go to heaven, they can't come back, but we can remember them and talk about them and keep them in our hearts." He nodded thoughtfully. "Mom doesn't like to talk about Daddy. It makes her eyes leaky." The description nearly broke my composure. "Sometimes it makes my eyes leaky too," I admitted. "But I'd be happy to tell you stories about your daddy anytime you want to hear them." "Did he like dinosaurs when he was little?" I smiled, grateful for the shift to easier territory. "He did, especially flying ones, pterodactyls and pteranodons." "Those aren't dinosaurs," Oliver corrected promptly. "They're flying reptiles. Common." "Mistake," I laughed, delighted by his matter-of-fact correction. "You're absolutely right. Your father would have been impressed with your knowledge." He beamed at the praise, then frowned slightly. "If you're my daddy's mommy, why haven't you visited before? Were you in heaven too?" The innocent question caught me completely off guard. Before I could formulate a response, Vivienne appeared in the doorway. "Oliver, time for your snack," she said, her tone deliberately light. "Grandma Eleanor needs to head home now." He pouted momentarily but didn't argue. "Will you come back on Saturday?" he asked me. "This Saturday," I confirmed, heart swelling at his eagerness. "We can decide then what adventure we might have." He hugged me goodbye with the full-body enthusiasm only children can muster, then raced downstairs ahead of us, the question about my absence apparently forgotten. Vivienne and I followed more slowly, the weight of the day's revelations and agreements settling between us. At the front door, she handed me a thick manila envelope. Oliver's schedule, medical information, allergies. He has a mild reaction to strawberries, his favorite activities, books he enjoys, everything you might need for your visits. I accepted the envelope, touched by this concrete evidence of her acceptance, however reluctant, of my place in Oliver's life. Thank you, Vivienne. I know today hasn't been easy. She met my eyes directly. I'm doing this for Oliver, and because it's what Harrison would have wanted, despite everything. I understand, I said, recognizing that we'd reached the limit of our fragile detente for one day. I'll call you tomorrow about the preschool payment. She nodded, then hesitated. Eleanor. About why I kept Oliver from you after Harrison died. We don't need to discuss that now, I said gently, sensing her emotional reserves were as depleted as my own. No, but we will need to, eventually, she insisted. There are things you should know about Harrison's last months, about why She trailed off, glancing toward the kitchen where Oliver's voice could be heard asking Lisa for apple slices with his yogurt. Another time, I agreed. We have that luxury now. As I drove home through the golden late afternoon light, the landscape, transforming from Oakridge's manicured perfection to the more natural beauty of the coastal hills, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months, a cautious hope. The day had been exhausting, revealing painful truths and setting difficult challenges in motion. But I'd seen my grandson, held his small hand in mine, heard him call me Grandma Eleanor without prompting. Small victories, perhaps, but precious ones. At home, I called Judith immediately, knowing she'd be waiting impatiently for news. Well, she demanded by way of greeting. How bad was it? Complicated, I replied, settling into my favorite chair with a cup of tea. Vivienne has been misusing Oliver's trust funds, and the foundation caught her. I knew it, Judith exclaimed, with the satisfaction of someone whose worst suspicions have been confirmed. Is she going to jail? Will you get custody of Oliver? Nothing so dramatic, I assured her, proceeding to outline the agreement we'd reached. When I mentioned the visitation schedule, Judith made a skeptical noise. And you trust her to honor this arrangement? After she kept you away for 8 months? I do, I said, surprising myself with my certainty. Something's changed, Judith. She's in real trouble, financial, possibly legal, and she needs allies, not more enemies. Just be careful, my sister warned. People like Vivienne can turn on a dime when it suits them. After finishing the call, I unpacked the manila envelope Vivienne had given me. Inside was a meticulously organized dossier on Oliver, medical, records, school reports, activity schedules, food preferences, even a list of his favorite books and television shows. The thoroughness spoke of both Vivienne's controlling nature and, perhaps, a genuine desire to ensure Oliver's comfort during our visits. A smaller envelope fell out from between the pages. Inside was a single photograph I'd never seen before. Harrison, holding newborn Oliver in the hospital, his face a mixture of awe and terror that all new parents know. On the back, in Harrison's handwriting, Oliver Thomas Pearson, 7 lbs 2 Oz, already plotting world domination. I held the photo carefully, wondering why Vivienne had included it. A peace offering? A reminder of what we'd both lost? Or perhaps, in her own way, an acknowledgement that Oliver needed connections to his father that only I could provide. Whatever her reasons, I placed the photograph on my mantel, next to the last family portrait taken before Harrison's death. Oliver would visit on Saturday, and there were dinosaur books to buy, cookies to bake, and stories about his father to remember. For the first time since Harrison died, the future held something more than solitary grief. It held Oliver, with his serious questions and dinosaur expertise. It held the possibility of healing, not just for me, but perhaps for Vivienne too. And most importantly, it held the promise that Harrison would live on in his son's smile, his curious mind, and his gentle heart. Saturday couldn't come soon enough. Saturday dawned with the kind of crisp October clarity that makes New England famous. The maples along my driveway had turned fiery overnight, as if autumn had finally committed to its full glory. I'd been awake since 5, too anxious to sleep, puttering around the house making final preparations for Oliver's visit. The coffee table held 3 new dinosaur books, carefully selected with the bookstore owner Catherine's help, along with a simple wooden puzzle featuring prehistoric creatures. I'd baked oatmeal cookies, remembering how Harrison had devoured them after school, and prepared a child-friendly lunch of grilled cheese sandwiches with tomato soup. Nothing elaborate, nothing that screamed trying too hard, though that's exactly what I was doing. At precisely 10 o'clock, Vivienne's Range Rover pulled into my driveway. My heart leapt to my throat as I watched Oliver unbuckle himself from his car seat and hop down, clutching Sierra the Triceratops under one arm. He wore a blue jacket with dinosaur patches sewn onto the elbows and small rain boots despite the clear weather. I opened the door before they reached it. "Good morning," Oliver charged forward with a child's enthusiasm. "Grandma Eleanor, do you have dinosaurs here? Mom said you might." "I have some dinosaur books and a puzzle," I told him. "And I thought we might make our own dinosaurs later if you'd like." His eyes widened. "Real ones?" "Art ones," I clarified, smiling. "With clay or paper?" This seemed to satisfy him. He bounded past me into the house, immediately drawn to the large windows overlooking the bay in the distance. Vivienne followed more slowly, carrying a small backpack. His extra clothes, snacks, and his EpiPen, just in case. Though he's never had a severe reaction, she explained, handing it to me. And I packed his dinosaur encyclopedia. He insists on taking it everywhere lately. "Thank you," I said, accepting the bag. An awkward pause followed as we stood in my entryway, neither quite sure how to proceed. The last time Vivienne had been in this house was for a tense Thanksgiving dinner when Harrison was still alive. "You have a lot of books," Oliver observed, having already discovered the floor-to-ceiling bookshelves in my living room. "I do love to read," I agreed. "Just like your daddy did." Vivienne checked her watch. "I'll be back at 4. Oliver knows to call me if he needs anything." I put my cell phone in his dinosaur backpack. "We'll be fine," I assured her. "I raised a son, remember? I do know something about looking after children." She flushed slightly. "Of course. I didn't mean to imply—" "It's all right," I said, softening my tone. "It's natural to be protective." She nodded, then knelt to Oliver's level. "Be good for Grandma Eleanor, okay? I'll see you this afternoon." "Okay, Mom." He accepted her kiss, on the cheek with the slight impatience of a child eager to begin a new adventure. Once Vivienne left, Oliver turned to me with serious eyes. "Do you have any plants that dinosaurs would eat?" And just like that, we were off and running. The morning passed in a blur of dinosaur classifications, herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores, he informed me solemnly, excavations in the garden where we searched for fossils, finding interesting rocks and one very surprised earthworm, and the creation of a dinosaur habitat using couch cushions and throw blankets. Oliver's enthusiasm was infectious, his imagination boundless. At one point, he declared my reading lamp was a time machine that could transport us back to the Jurassic period. "But we need special suits," he explained, "or we'll get stepped on." "What would these suits look like?" I asked, following his lead. "Like astronaut suits, but stronger," he decided after careful consideration. "With pointy things on top so dinosaurs think we're plants with thorns." My heart swelled watching him create these elaborate scenarios. Harrison had been the same way, able to transform ordinary objects into extraordinary adventures through sheer force of imagination. At lunchtime, I served the grilled cheese and tomato soup at the kitchen table. Oliver eyed the soup suspiciously. "It's not spicy, is it?" he asked, poking his spoon into the red liquid. Not at all, I assured him. It's very gentle soup. Your daddy used to love it on cold days. He took a tentative sip, then nodded approval. It's okay, he declared, which I gathered was high praise from a 4-year-old. As we ate, he peppered me with questions about his father. What games Harrison played as a child, what his favorite dinosaur had been, whether he'd been afraid of the dark. No, but he'd been terrified of the vacuum cleaner until age 7, which made Oliver laugh delightedly. Did my daddy like school? He asked between bites of sandwich. He loved learning, I told him. Though sometimes sitting still in class was hard for him. His mind worked very fast and jumped from one interesting thing to another. Oliver nodded, solemnly. That happens to me too. Ms. Abernathy says I have an active brain. That's a good way to put it, I agreed. Active brains notice lots of things other people might miss. He seemed pleased with this description. Mom says I need extra learning because my brain is special. That's why I have tutors and special classes. I chose my next words carefully. Learning is wonderful, but playing and exploring are important too. Sometimes the best discoveries happen when you're just having fun. Oliver considered this while dunking his sandwich into his soup. Like finding the earthworm in your garden? Exactly. Like that. After lunch, we settled in the living room with modeling clay. I'd purchased several colors, and Oliver immediately began combining them to create what he called dinosaur-accurate hues. Did you know T-Rex might have had feathers? He informed me as he molded a surprisingly recognizable Tyrannosaurus. Like giant chickens, but way scarier. I didn't know that, I admitted. Science has learned a lot about dinosaurs since I was in school. Science is always learning new things, he said with such grave authority that I had to suppress a smile. That's its job. As we worked on our clay creations, I gently steered the conversation toward the changes in his life. Your mom mentioned you might be moving to a different house someday soon. His hands paused briefly. Yeah, Mom says our house is too big now that it's just us. But I don't want to leave my dinosaur room. Change can be hard, I agreed. But you know what? Dinosaurs had to adapt to changes in their environment too. The ones that could adapt were the most successful. He considered this scientific approach to the problem, like how some dinosaurs evolved into birds. Exactly like that, I said, impressed with his knowledge. And wherever you move, your dinosaurs will come with you. You might even get to design a new dinosaur room. This prospect seemed to cheer him. Could it have a volcano? Mom said no to the volcano in my current room? We'd have to check with your mom about volcanoes, I laughed. But I bet you could have dinosaur wall paintings or special shelves for your collection. We spent the next hour creating an entire prehistoric landscape from clay, complete with volcanoes, several, palm trees, and a watering hole where different species gathered peacefully despite Oliver's admission that this isn't scientifically accurate because some would definitely eat the others. As the afternoon progressed, I noticed him becoming quieter, his energy waning. When he yawned for the third time in as many minutes, I suggested we read one of the new dinosaur books together. On the couch? I'm not tired, he protested, even as he curled against my side with Sira the Triceratops clutched to his chest. Of course not, I agreed. We're just taking a reading break. He was asleep before we reached the 5th page, his small body warm against mine, eyelashes casting tiny shadows on his cheeks. I sat motionless, savoring the weight of him, the soft sound of his breathing, the complete trust with which he'd surrendered to sleep in my presence. How strange life was, with its unexpected turns and second chances. 8 months ago, I'd never imagined holding my grandson like this. Now here he was, dreaming perhaps of the clay dinosaurs drying on my coffee table. The afternoon light shifted across the room as I held him, thinking of Harrison at this age. Just as curious, just as bright, just as quick to collapse into exhaustion after a morning of intense exploration. The similarity caused a pang that was both sweet and painful. Oliver would never know his father, but perhaps through me, he could know something of the man Harrison had been. When he woke an hour later, slightly disoriented and flushed with sleep, I offered him a cookie and a glass of milk. He accepted both gratefully, seemingly unbothered by the fact that he'd fallen asleep mid-story. "Your house smells nice," he observed between bites, "like cookies and books and the ocean." "Thank you," I smiled. "That's a lovely compliment." "Mom's house smells like cleaning stuff mostly," he continued with a child's unfiltered honesty. "And sometimes like those sticks that make the air smell like flowers but not real flowers." "Reed diffusers," I supplied, picturing Vivienne's sterile. "Designer home." "Yeah, those. I like your smell better." As 4 o'clock approached, we gathered his things, carefully packing the clay dinosaurs in a shoebox for transport. "We should let them dry completely before painting them," I explained. "Maybe next time you visit, we can add colors." "Next Saturday?" he asked hopefully. "The Saturday after next," I corrected gently. "We'll alternate weekends." He frowned, working through the concept. "That's too long." "It will come before you know it," I promised. "And you'll have preschool and your other activities to keep you busy." The sound of tires on gravel announced Vivienne's arrival. Oliver ran to the window, then back to me with a sudden serious expression. "Grandma Eleanor, I forgot to ask you an important thing." "What's that, sweetheart?" "Why didn't you visit me before? When Daddy went to heaven?" The question I'd avoided previously now demanded an answer. I knelt to his level, choosing my words with care. "Sometimes grown-ups have disagreements about what's best. Your mom and I needed time to figure things out. But what matters is that I'm here now, and I'll keep coming back." He studied my face with a child's uncanny ability to sense half-truths. "Did you and Mom have a fight?" "Not exactly a fight," I hedged. "More of a misunderstanding. But we're working together now because we both love you very much." This explanation seemed to satisfy him, at least for the moment. "I'm glad you're my grandma," he said simply, throwing his arms around my neck, in a fierce hug. Tears pricked my eyes as I returned his embrace. "I'm glad too, Oliver. More than you can possibly know." Vivienne entered without knocking, having seen us through the front window. She looked different somehow, less polished, more human. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore jeans instead of her usual tailored attire. "How was your day?" she asked, her tone carefully neutral. "Great!" Oliver exclaimed before I could answer. "We found fossils and made clay dinosaurs, and Grandma Eleanor told me about when Daddy was little and he was scared of the vacuum cleaner." A ghost of a smile crossed Vivienne's face. "He never did like loud noises. Would you like a cup of tea before you head back?" I offered, surprising myself with the invitation. She hesitated, then nodded. "That would be nice, actually." While Oliver showed her his clay creations, I prepared tea in the kitchen. When I returned with 2 steaming mugs, they were seated on the couch together, Vivienne listening attentively as Oliver explained the detailed ecosystem represented in our prehistoric diorama. "The T-Rex has feathers because that's scientifically accurate," he informed her seriously. "I see," she nodded. "Very educational." I handed her a mug, and she accepted it with a quiet, "Thank you." We sat in surprisingly comfortable silence, watching. Oliver arranged and rearranged the clay figures. "He had a good time," she observed softly. "I did too," I replied. "He's remarkable, Vivienne, so curious and thoughtful." "He gets that from Harrison," she said, a familiar sadness flickering across her face. After a moment, she added, "I've started looking at smaller houses. There's a nice neighborhood closer to his preschool with more modest homes." "That sounds sensible," I said, careful not to sound judgmental about her previous choices. She took a sip of tea, then asked, "Would you be willing to take Oliver one afternoon next week as well? I have some important meetings about refinancing, and his nanny has midterms." The request, so normal and yet so meaningful in our evolving relationship, caught me by surprise. Of course. Any afternoon works for me. Thursday, then, I could drop. Him after preschool around 2 and pick him up around 6? Perfect, I agreed, trying not to appear too eager. As they prepared to leave, Oliver insisted on giving me another hug. "Next time, can we paint the dinosaurs? And can I bring my fossil kit?" "Absolutely to both," I promised. From the doorway, Vivienne turned back with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Thank you, Eleanor, for today and for everything else we discussed." I nodded, understanding the layers in her simple statement. "We'll make it work, Vivienne, for Oliver's sake." "For Oliver," she agreed, then added more softly, "and for Harrison." As their car disappeared down the driveway, I stood on my porch in the fading afternoon light, my heart fuller than it had been in months. The clay dinosaurs would dry on my coffee table, waiting for Oliver's return. The cookies we hadn't eaten would keep in their container. The cushion where he'd napped still held a slight indentation from his small body. These weren't grand gestures or monumental events. They were small, ordinary moments of connection, the kind that, strung together over time, create the relationship between a grandmother and her grandson, the kind that can't be replaced with expensive toys or educational enhancements, the kind that Harrison would have wanted for his son. Thursday couldn't come soon enough. And beyond that, countless other Thursdays and Saturdays stretched into a future suddenly rich with possibility. The weeks that followed took on a rhythm I'd forgotten life could have, the beautiful cadence of family connection that had been missing since Harrison's death. Oliver's Thursday afternoon visits became a regular fixture, followed by our alternating Saturday adventures. Each time he arrived, the bond between us strengthened, his initial shy curiosity evolving into comfortable familiarity. "Grandma Eleanor," he would call, racing up my front steps with some new treasure to show me, a special rock, an unusual leaf, or a drawing of yet another dinosaur species I'd never heard of. The formality of my full title eventually shortened to simply Grandma L, a nickname that made my heart swell each time he used it. November arrived with its shorter days and longer shadows. Vivienne had listed her Oakridge mansion with a real estate agent specializing in luxury properties, though the market remained sluggish. Meanwhile, she'd begun viewing more modest homes in the area she'd mentioned, still comfortable and in good school districts, but without the ostentatious grandeur of her current residence. Our relationship had evolved too, not quite friendship, but a cautious alliance built on mutual concern for Oliver. The hostility and resentment that had characterized our earlier interactions gradually softened into something resembling respect, or at least civil cooperation. One Tuesday afternoon in mid-November, my phone rang with Vivienne's number on the Chicha display, unusual, as our communications typically happened via text message. "Eleanor," she began without preamble, her voice strained. "I have a huge favor to ask. My realtor just called with a potential buyer who wants to see the house tomorrow. But Oliver's running a fever and can't go to preschool. Lisa has a mandatory seminar, and my parents are in Florida. Is there any chance you could come to the house and stay with him while I handle the showing?" "Of course," I replied immediately. "What time do you need me?" The relief in her voice was palpable. "The showing is at 10 and could last a couple of hours. Could you come around 9:30? "I hate to inconvenience you, but—" "It's no inconvenience," I assured her. "I'm happy to help." The next morning dawned cold and gray, with the threat of the season's first snow hanging in the leaden sky. I packed a bag with books, simple card, games, and homemade chicken soup, my mother's recipe that Harrison had always claimed possessed magical healing properties. Vivienne answered the door in a tailored suit, her hair and makeup impeccable, though the shadows under her eyes betrayed her exhaustion. "Thank you for coming," she said, stepping aside to let me enter. "He was up half the night coughing, but his fever's down this morning." "Poor thing," I sympathized. "I brought some soup for later, if he feels up to eating." She accepted the container with genuine gratitude. "That's very thoughtful. He's in the family room watching cartoons. I've set out his medicine. He's due for another dose at 11. The family room was a space I hadn't seen during my previous visits. A relatively modest area by the standards of the house, with comfortable seating and a large television. Oliver lay curled on the couch under a dinosaur-patterned blanket, looking small and pale. "Grandma Elle," he croaked when he saw me, his voice hoarse from coughing. "I'm sick." "I know, sweetheart," I said, settling beside him and placing a hand on his forehead. "Still warm, but not alarmingly so. That's why I've come to keep you company, while your mom talks to some people." Vivienne hovered in the doorway, her expression torn between professional obligation and maternal concern. "His pediatrician says it's just a virus, but call me immediately if his fever goes above 101.5. All the numbers are on the fridge, including Dr. Winter's direct line." "We'll be fine," I assured her. "This isn't my first rodeo with childhood illness." She nodded, then came to kiss Oliver's forehead. "Be good for Grandma Eleanor. I'll just be showing some people around the house, and then we can watch that dinosaur documentary you've been asking about." "The one about the bones in Argentina?" he asked, perking up slightly. "That's the one," she confirmed, smoothing his hair. To me, she added, "The doorbell is disabled so you won't be disturbed. The realtor has a lockbox." After she left, Oliver and I settled into a quiet morning. He dozed intermittently, waking to sip water or ask for a different position of his pillows. I read to him from the books I'd brought. Not just dinosaur stories this time, but some of the classics Harrison had loved at his age. During one of his more alert periods, Oliver looked up at me with fever-bright eyes. "Mommy says we're moving to a smaller house." "Yes, that's what she's told me too," I replied gently. "She says we don't need such a big place for just 2 people. He frowned slightly. "But what about all my dinosaurs? And my special room?" "Your dinosaurs will come with you," I assured him. "And you might have a different kind of special room, but it will still be yours." He considered this, his small face serious despite the flush of fever. "Will you still visit me if we live in a different house?" "Of course I will," I promised. "I'll visit you wherever you are." This seemed to satisfy him, and he drifted back to sleep, his breathing congested but steady. I watched him, this precious child who had Harrison's expressions and curiosity, wondering how I'd survived 8 months without knowing him. Around 11, I administered his medicine as directed, following it with a few spoonfuls of my chicken soup, which he declared better than Mom's soup that comes in boxes. Shortly afterward, I heard voices echoing from the foyer. Vivienne and what sounded like a couple, presumably the potential buyers, with a realtor's professionally enthusiastic tones rising above the others. Oliver stirred at the sound. "Who's that?" "Just the people looking at the house," I explained, stroking his hair. "They're seeing if they might want to live here someday. When we don't live here anymore," he clarified, his understanding of the situation clearly more complete than Vivienne had perhaps realized. "That's right." He sat up slightly, listening to the footsteps and voices moving overhead. "Do they have kids?" "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe." "I hope they do," he said decisively. "This house needs kids. It's too quiet without them." Out of the mouths of babes, I thought, struck by the wisdom in his simple observation. This massive showcase home, with its perfect furnishings and elaborate decorative schemes, did indeed feel sterile without the chaos and energy children bring. Tour continued above us, footsteps occasionally creaking overhead as the potential buyers explored the second and third floors. Eventually, the voices faded, and the distant sound of the front door closing indicated their departure. Moments later, Vivienne appeared in the doorway, her professional mask slipping to reveal exhaustion beneath. "How is he?" "Fever's down," I reported. "He's had his medicine and a little soup. How was the showing?" "Promising," she said, sinking into an armchair. "They have 3 children and liked the space. The wife loved the kitchen. The husband winced at the asking price, but their realtor thinks they can make it work." She glanced at Oliver, who had dozed off again. "Did he give you any trouble?" "None at all. He's been a perfect patient." She smiled faintly, reaching over to adjust his blanket. "He likes being here with you. Every Thursday night he tells me every single thing you did together, in minute detail." "I cherish our time together," I said simply. Vivienne was quiet for a moment, looking at her sleeping son. "I've been thinking about what you said, about him needing more unstructured time, fewer scheduled activities. You might have been right about that." This admission, offered without defensiveness, surprised me. "Oh?" "Last week, his primary tutor suggested we might be overloading him. Said sometimes he seems more anxious about getting things right than enjoying the learning process." She sighed. "Harrison was never like that. He loved learning for its own sake, not to meet some standard." "Harrison had a different childhood," I pointed out gently. "Less pressure, more freedom to explore at his own pace." She nodded, eyes still, on Oliver. "I wanted to give him advantages Harrison didn't have. The best schools, the best teachers, the best opportunities. But maybe some of what Harrison did have was valuable too," I finished when she trailed off. "Yes." She looked up at me, vulnerability evident in her expression. "I don't want Oliver to lose his joy in learning, or to feel that his worth depends on achievement." "It's a delicate balance," I acknowledged, "providing opportunity without creating pressure." "Harrison always knew who he was," she said softly. "Even when we first met in college, he had this certainty about his values, his interests. I envied that. I'm still trying to figure it out." The candor of this confession, perhaps the most personal thing she'd ever shared with me, created a moment of genuine connection between us. For the first time, I glimpsed the young woman Harrison had fallen in love with, beneath the polished, defensive exterior she typically presented. "It's never too late to reassess and adjust course," I offered. "For yourself or for Oliver?" She nodded, then gestured to the soup container on the side table. "Thank you for bringing that, and for coming today. I don't know what I would have done otherwise." "That's what family does," I said. "We help each other." A flicker of emotion crossed her face at the word family. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. After a moment, she said, "Would you like to stay for lunch? Once the medicine kicks in fully, Oliver usually rallies a bit in the afternoon." "I'd like that," I replied, recognizing the invitation as significant beyond its simple words. Oliver woke about 30 minutes later, groggy but less feverish. He brightened when he saw both of us sitting nearby. "Did the house people like my dinosaur room?" he asked. Vivienne smiled. "They did. Their oldest son thought it was pretty cool." "Good," he declared. "He can have it when we move, but not my special fossils. Those come with me." "Absolutely," Vivienne agreed. "Those are yours forever." While Oliver ate a few more spoonfuls of soup, Vivienne excused herself to make calls to her realtor and the potential buyer's agent. Left alone with my grandson, I found myself studying his profile, the shape of his nose, the curve of his cheek, the cowlick at his crown, all echoes of Harrison at this age. "Grandma L?" he asked suddenly. "Yes, sweetheart?" "When we move to the new house, will it be closer to your house?" I hadn't considered this possibility. "I'm not sure," That depends on which house your mom chooses. He nodded thoughtfully, then declared with 4-year-old certainty, "It should be closer. Then I could visit more days, not just Thursdays and some Saturdays." "That would be nice," I agreed, my heart warming at his desire for more time together. "I'll tell Mom," he said with the confidence of a child who believes adults always listen to reasonable suggestions. "She wants me to be happy in the new house." When Vivienne returned, she brought a tray with sandwiches and a pot of tea. As we ate our simple lunch while Oliver dozed again on the couch, she mentioned casually, "One of the houses I'm considering is in Millfield. It's only about 20 minutes from Lakewood Hills." Millfield, a pleasant town roughly halfway between her current location and my coastal home. Was this coincidence, or had Oliver already made his request? Either way, the prospect of having them closer sent a surge of joy through me. "That sounds like a nice area," I said neutrally, not wanting to appear too eager. "Good schools, reasonable commute to Portland, and," she hesitated, "closer to family." Our eyes met briefly over our teacups, a wordless acknowledgement passing between us. We weren't just tolerating each other for Oliver's sake anymore. Something had shifted, almost imperceptibly, but significantly. The ground beneath our relationship had changed from shifting sand to something more substantial. Not yet solid bedrock, but no longer treacherous either. As I prepared to leave later that afternoon, Oliver's fever having broken enough for him to sit up and watch his promised dinosaur documentary, Vivienne walked me to the door. "The showing went well enough that they're discussing making an offer," she told me. "If they do, things might move quickly. I may need to impose on your generosity again during the transition." "Anytime," I assured her. "Oliver is never an imposition." She nodded, then added, "I know this sounds strange after everything, but I'm glad he has you in his life. He needs connections to Harrison, and those can't all come from me." "Thank you for allowing me to provide those connections," I replied, deeply touched by her admission. As I drove home through the first snow flurries of the season, I reflected on how differently this day might have unfolded before our fragile truce. Vivienne would have called anyone else, agencies, distant acquaintances, perhaps even struggled through alone, rather than reaching out to me. Oliver would have continued missing the stories and memories of his father that only I could provide. And I would have remained outside looking in, a stranger to my own grandson. Instead, here we were, not perfect, not without complications, but slowly building a new kind of family from the wreckage left by Harrison's death. A family defined not by blood alone, but by choice and commitment, and the shared love of a little boy who connected us all. Spring came early to Maine that year. By mid-March, crocuses pushed through the last patches of snow in my garden, and the days stretched noticeably longer. With the changing season came other transformations as well, some visible, others more subtle, but no less profound. Vivienne had sold the Oakridge mansion in January, accepting an offer slightly below asking price, but enough to resolve her most pressing financial concerns. After careful consideration, she purchased a charming colonial in Millfield, a 4-bedroom home with a generous yard backing onto conservation land. It was a fraction of the size of her previous residence, but infinitely more suited to raising a child. Most importantly, as Oliver had hoped, it was just 22 minutes from my house in Lakewood Hills. The move happened during a February thaw, with Robert Pearson surprisingly stepping in to help organize the logistics. As promised, Oliver's dinosaur collection made the journey intact, finding a new home in a cozy bedroom with sloped ceilings and a window seat overlooking the backyard. The elaborate educational space from the Oakridge house had not been recreated. Instead, Oliver's new room included a simple desk for projects, comfortable reading nooks, and plenty of space for imaginative play. Our visitation schedule had evolved organically as the barriers between us lowered. The strict alternating Saturdays gave way to a more flexible arrangement. Sometimes Oliver stayed with me for an entire weekend. Other times, Vivienne joined us for outings or meals. The three of us had even attended a special dinosaur exhibit at the Portland Natural History Museum together, Oliver charging ahead while Vivienne and I followed at a more sedate pace, exchanging amused glances at his enthusiasm. Trust, like the spring flowers, was emerging gradually. Vivienne had followed through on the repayment plan for Oliver's trust, making consistent monthly contributions despite the financial strain of the move and her still struggling real estate development business. For my part, I'd maintained appropriate boundaries, never overstepping or criticizing her parenting decisions, even when I might have made different choices. We had reached, if not friendship, then a functioning family dynamic centered around Oliver's well-being. On this particular Saturday in late March, Oliver and I were planting a small vegetable garden in my backyard. At 5 years old now, he was becoming more coordinated, though dirt still somehow found its way onto his face regardless of the task. "Grandma Elle, look!" he exclaimed, holding up an earthworm with reverent care. "It's making the soil healthy by eating dead leaves and pooping them out as good dirt." "That's exactly right," I smiled, impressed by his understanding. "Worms are excellent garden helpers." He gently returned the worm to the soil, patting the ground softly afterward. "There you go, little guy. Keep making good dirt." We continued working, Oliver handling the serious responsibilities of seed packet holding and occasional watering. As we planted the last row of carrots, he looked up at me thoughtfully. "Mom says Daddy loved gardens," he said, a statement rather than a question. "He did," I confirmed. "He helped me plant tomatoes and peppers every spring, even when he was all grown up." Oliver nodded, absorbing this connection to his father. These moments had become increasingly frequent, little conversations where he sought to understand the man he would never meet, but whose legacy shaped his life in countless ways. "Was he good at growing things?" Oliver asked. "Very good. He had a special touch with plants. They seemed to thrive just because he cared about them." Oliver looked at his dirt-covered hands thoughtfully. "Maybe I have that too." "I think you might," I agreed, my heart swelling with the simple beauty of genetic gifts passing through generations. We finished our planting and were washing up at the outdoor spigot when Vivienne's car pulled into the driveway. She wasn't expected until dinner time, and my surprise must have shown on my face. "Mom's early," Oliver observed, running to greet her with wet hands and muddy knees. Vivienne embraced him despite the dirt transfer to her simple cotton dress, another change from her previous tailored wardrobe. "I had an idea," she explained, looking from Oliver to me. "It's such a beautiful day, and the tide is low at Crescent Beach. I thought maybe we could all go tide pooling this afternoon." The suggestion, spontaneous, inclusive, and focused on simple outdoor exploration rather than structured enrichment, represented everything that had shifted in our relationship over the past months. "Can we, Grandma Elle?" "Please?" Oliver bounced, on his toes, already excited by the prospect. "That sounds wonderful," I agreed. "Let me just gather a few things." 20 minutes later, we were driving in Vivienne's car toward the coast, Oliver chattering excitedly about the creatures we might find. Sea stars, anemones, tiny crabs, perhaps even an octopus if we were extraordinarily lucky. Crescent Beach lived up to its name, a perfect curved stretch of sand bordered by rocky outcroppings perfect for tide pool formation. The spring afternoon had drawn other families as well, but the beach was large enough to afford plenty of space for exploration. Oliver charged ahead, equipped with a small bucket and the boundless enthusiasm only children possess. Vivienne and I followed more slowly, each carrying additional supplies, towels, snacks, field guides for identifying our discoveries. "He's thriving," I observed as we watched him examine his first tide pool with scientific precision. "The move has been good for him." Vivienne nodded. "He's more relaxed, His preschool teacher commented on it too, said he's less anxious about getting things right and more engaged in the process of learning. And you? I asked carefully. How are you? Adjusting? She considered the question, her gaze following Oliver as he crouched at the edge of a rocky pool. It's been clarifying. Downsizing forced me to evaluate what really matters. Turns out most of what I thought was essential isn't. That's a valuable lesson at any age, I noted. One Harrison understood instinctively, she added softly. He never cared about status symbols or keeping up appearances. I always thought that was charming naivete, but now I wonder if it wasn't wisdom instead. Before I could respond, Oliver called us over excitedly. Mom, Grandma L, I found a sea star. A real one. We joined him at a particularly rich tide pool where a purple sea star clung to the rocky edge. Oliver's face shone with discovery, his eyes wide with wonder. It's beautiful, Vivienne said, kneeling beside him regardless of the wet sand soaking her dress. Do you remember what sea stars eat? They push their stomachs outside their bodies to digest food, he declared with macabre delight. It's called extracellular digestion, I supplied, smiling at his enthusiasm for gruesome scientific facts, another trait inherited from his father. We spent the next 2 hours moving from pool to pool, cataloging our discoveries, taking a few photographs, but being careful to leave everything as we found it. Oliver proved to be a careful observer, noticing minute details that even we adults missed. The nearly transparent shrimp hiding among seaweed, the tiny blennies darting between rocks. As the afternoon waned and the tide began to creep back in, we settled on a dry section of beach for a simple picnic. Oliver, exhausted from his explorations, lay between us on the blanket, munching on apple slices and recounting his favorite discoveries. This was the best day, he declared with the absolute certainty of childhood. We should do this every Saturday. Vivienne smiled, meeting my eyes over his head. Maybe not every Saturday, but definitely again soon. As Oliver's energy finally flagged and he curled against Vivienne's side, she stroked his hair gently. After a moment of companionable silence, she spoke, her voice soft but clear above the rhythmic sound of the waves. I owe you an explanation, Eleanor, about why I kept Oliver from you after Harrison died. The statement caught me off guard. We had developed a tentative peace without ever directly addressing the 8-month estrangement that had preceded it. You don't have to, I began, but she shook her head. I do. You deserve to know. She checked that Oliver was dozing before continuing. In the last months before Harrison's aneurysm, we were having difficulties, serious ones. This was news to me. Harrison had never mentioned relationship problems during our weekly phone calls. What kind of difficulties? I asked carefully. I wanted to move to the Oakridge house. Harrison thought it was ridiculous. Too ostentatious, too expensive, too far from his work and from you. She sighed. We argued about it constantly. I was determined to provide Oliver with what I considered the best possible environment. Harrison argued that a loving, stable home mattered more than an impressive address. Recognizing Harrison's values in her description, I nodded encouragingly. The night before he died, we had our worst fight yet. I accused him of being childishly attached to you, of never having properly separated from his mother. Her voice caught. I told him he needed to choose between catering to your expectations and building the life I wanted for our family. The revelation hit me with physical force. I had no idea. Harrison wouldn't have told you. He was loyal that way. Her eyes filled with tears that she blinked away. The next morning, we were still angry with each other. He left for work without our usual goodbye. Hours later, I got the call from the hospital. Oliver stirred slightly, and she lowered her voice. After he died, the guilt was overwhelming. Our last words had been in anger. The last thing I'd asked of him was to distance himself from you. She met my eyes directly. I couldn't face you, Eleanor. Every time I thought about contacting you, I remembered that awful fight, those terrible accusations. So I convinced myself that keeping Oliver close was what Harrison would have wanted, that you were somehow a negative influence I needed to protect him from. Oh, Vivienne, I breathed, understanding at last. It was wrong, she admitted. Selfish and cruel and completely unfair to both you and Oliver. I was drowning in grief and guilt, and I made you suffer for it. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her confession settling between us. Finally, I reached across Oliver's sleeping form and took her hand. Thank you for telling me, I said softly. It helps to understand. She squeezed my hand briefly, before releasing it. When the trust issues forced me to contact you, I was certain you'd use it against me. That you'd punish me by taking Oliver away or exposing me to the Foundation. Your kindness, it was unexpected. We both loved Harrison, I said simply. And we both love Oliver. That's what matters now. She nodded, gazing out at the ocean. Harrison would be pleased, I think, to see us here like this, to know Oliver has both of us in his life. I think so too, I agreed, watching the gentle rise and fall of my grandson's chest as he slept peacefully between us. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the water in shades of gold and amber, I felt a sense of completeness I hadn't experienced since Harrison's death. The absence of my son would always be a hollow space in my heart, but it was no longer the defining feature of my existence. In its place had grown something new, this reconfigured family, imperfect but resilient, built on shared love for the sleeping child between us. Oliver stirred, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. Did I fall asleep? Did I miss anything? Just some grown-up talk, Vivienne assured him. The tide's coming in. We should pack up soon. He nodded, then looked between us with a child's perceptiveness. You're not fighting anymore, are you? You and Grandma Elle? Vivienne and I exchanged surprised glances. We weren't fighting, sweetheart, I began. Yes, you were, he insisted. Before, when I couldn't see Grandma Elle. You were mad at each other. Children. Miss nothing, I thought, not for the first time. We had some disagreements, Vivienne admitted carefully. But we've worked them out. Because we both love you very much. This explanation satisfied him. Good, he declared. Because we're a family. And families should be together. The simple wisdom in his statement brought tears to my eyes. Out of tragedy and misunderstanding, through resentment and reconciliation, we had indeed become a family. Not the one any of us had envisioned, but a family nonetheless. As we gathered our belongings and headed back toward the parking lot, Oliver between us holding both our hands, I thought of Harrison, the son I had raised with such care, whose life had been cut tragically short, but whose legacy lived on in his remarkable child and in the healing that had eventually come to those who loved him most. Swing me, Oliver commanded, and Vivienne, and I complied, lifting him by his arms as he leapt forward, squealing with delight. In that moment, with spring sunshine warming our shoulders and the promise of new growth all around us, I felt Harrison's presence more strongly than I had since his death. Not as a ghost or a supernatural visitation, but as the invisible thread that connected us all, mother, wife, child, bound together by love that had weathered the worst and emerged, against all odds, stronger for the journey. The trust fund that had once been a source of contention now served its intended purpose, managed with care and transparency. But the true trust, the faith we had slowly built in each other, was the more valuable inheritance. It was what Oliver would carry forward, long after bank accounts and material possessions ceased to matter. As we reached the car, Oliver turned to me with Harrison's smile. Next weekend, can we plant vegetables at Mom's house too? So I can have 2 gardens to take care of? I think that's a wonderful idea, I told him, catching Vivienne's nod of agreement. 2 gardens, 2 homes, 1 family. Not perfect, not without complications, but whole in all the ways that mattered. And in the end, isn't that what we all hope to grow? Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.